Scarlet Nexus is so good that I spent years desperate for a sequel. And now in 2025, please, God, don't make a sequel. Don't ruin this. Don't defile one of my favourite games ever with modernity, please. I once said, actually, that Scarlet Nexus is too good for its own good. But now I think that that is my favourite thing about it. I came into this thinking that maybe I'd say no it's not, but actually it is, and I like that. Put simply, its ambitious nature led it to reaching highs so high, I came to expect more from it than it would ultimately deliver. And I think others did too. But even then, within the audacity of this game's sheer attempt to even reach those heights to begin with, I gained a respect for the experience. Acted as a shield to protect me from tapping out of the game when it made the catastrophically embarrassing mistakes that it did. To see the mistakes, the flaws of something you love, and even explore them, will often have the effect of making you appreciate it more than you ever did before, helping you to tolerate as much because you can see the whole picture this way. It's a unique way of looking at it, it's a unique perspective, and it's a schizophrenic KINODREAM, the anti-JRPG. I was getting bored. I was getting real tired of the generic JRPG formula before I played this game that so many other Japanese role-playing games were following and had been following for literal decades. I'm knocking my social cred down all the way, and that's because I play JRPGs. But doing essays about them online makes it even worse, so the least you could do is not be a generic pile of crap. And deep down in the innermost depths of Bandai Namco, did they hear my cries for something original and chuck it my way like a car being thrown by psychic powers in the game. Scarlet Nexus arrived in 2021, and a year later it was in my hands. And it feels like I've known it forever, and also like it was just yesterday. Sure, it has those JRPG characteristics here and there, I will admit this much, but it doesn't pander to the typical JRPG demographic at all. It is not written for emotionally stunted or sex-obsessed teenagers. It doesn't have friendship speeches that drag on for literal minutes. It isn't padded to hell and back with filler. Scarlet Nexus makes me feel good in a way that no other game can pull off because it avoids these things. And I'm like 90% dead inside, but this game has a narrative running through it that I connected with because it just says it's never too late to change your direction. And sometimes diving into nostalgia will reveal the key to your future. That you can throw cards. It is a game, after all, making the future better. Not giving up on it, not giving up on yourself, being open to change, all the while using drama and comedy and wrapping it all up into a big ball of crazy anime weirdness with all the best stuff of JRPGs and very little of the worst. Now that's a good idea. That's a formula I can get around. And if you're not throwing cars at people, using your brain, if you're not listening to music that's literally its own genre, while exploring some of the most beautiful scenery ever in a video game with some of the most incredible art direction, you're not playing Scarlet Nexus. The question you got to ask yourself now is, why not? I mean, it is very special, obviously. The title wasn't clickbait, I meant it. I think it is the JRPG of the decade. It's a beautiful look into a fresh new take on the genre. This idea that I keep seeing floated around that you can't criticize the things that you love is one that never really holds up. So in that sense, I can confidently state that this game is a mixed bag, and also the best thing to come out of a very stale gaming market in general for many, many years. And its greatest triumphs and failures alike are all branches stemming from the same roots. It all stems from the overly ambitious and overly creative nature of the project. You think that would always lead to something good, but the reality is it's a coin flip, really. I guess I'm saying that they're simply the manifestation of the ambitious nature of the project and the annoying reality of game development, and how terribly these two things intersect, specifically in the modern age. I don't like hyperbole, but Scarlet Nexus is, in my opinion, one of the greatest video games of all time, but that's all subjective anyway. I guess what I'm saying is it might be my favourite of all time, and it's right up there. It's the most underrated and underappreciated JRPG I've ever played, and I played at least 2 JRPGs in my life.
Please support the OSF!
It's got so much soul, and it makes me feel alive in a way that only 3 other games ever have. Final Fantasy XIII, Nier Automata, Skyrim, for those wondering, maybe Persona 5. It's insanely unique, even for a JRPG among literally thousands of others in a genre already known for how unconventional it is. It's the most amazing hidden gem that I've ever found, not only in terms of JRPGs but gaming in general. But being boxed into that JRPG subgenre alongside so much generic slop and also incredible games led to it getting nowhere nowhere near the recognition that I think it deserved. And sure man, it hurts, I think, because when I see how unknown it still is, especially considering it was exactly what the JRPG scene needed at the time, it does still in many ways make me wonder why it is that it didn't get more noticed. Even JRPGs have gotten rather stale, so something like this really opens the floodgates, and within the remarkably niche bubble of this subgenre, which is essentially a niche within a niche, it's kind of a relief to know that outside of Nier Automata, publishers are willing to occasionally let a game dev try something new and wacky and weird. But I've got to admit, my inability to let go of Scarlet Nexus is as much a result of its shortcomings as it is what was once my desire to see it continue in the form of a sequel. I wanted a sequel bad, man. One so grand that it would ascend to the top of JRPG Mountain, pissing down on every piece of soulless crap below it, lest it fade into obscurity long before its time. But now, I realise that I love it too much for a sequel to ruin it. The juxtaposition of my inherent desire to see a sequel to Scarlet Nexus so as to make right its many wrongs was also counterbalanced nicely by my borderline unhealthy attachment to it on account of how incredibly charming it is, helping me to realise that the sequel is probably the worst thing that could ever happen to it, despite the innate potential. Modern gaming has a way of killing potential and replacing it with a reality that's best suited to a bad ending in a Steins Gate game. The game is recent in relative terms. That is because deep into 2021, Scarlet Nexus lured me in. My time with it went beyond admittedly stupid but fun concepts like scores and into something far more metaphysical. That's why I don't really do reviews. Scarlet Nexus can't be quantified with a score. That said, I need an excuse to revisit it for the third time and to explain why it's a game worth playing, so I'll be running through the game. Both playthroughs, that is, with each of the dual protagonists, in parallel, but with a perpetual procession of commentary and tangents. It's less a recap and more using the linear structure of the game as a set of waypoints, while delineating it to make it more cohesive, as per usual. Reason for that is that Scarlet Nexus is linear twice. 2 routes, 2 main characters, 2 separate stories that intersect at certain points. No open world, no non-linear stuff, just simplicity itself bisected into 2 halves of a whole. You might hear Bandai Namco and immediately think Tales, or maybe Tekken, and they develop as well as publish, so you might even think of something like Elden Ring. But within the JRPG landscape, Tales is likely coming to mind first, and so Scarlet Nexus, at least when you put it next to literally any Tales game, is in my opinion the most unique and creative thing, and certainly the most exciting, the Bandai have done for a very, very long time. Tales is perpetually situated within a high fantasy setting, so something with modern architecture and normal looking vehicles, despite all the crazy powers, is still a really nice departure from that. Despite the differences between the game's 2 routes, with some parts being identical and others deviating wildly, in order to avoid having to replay certain things while doing one route followed by another, we'll be swapping from one route to the other, chapter by chapter. And nicely enough for me, New Game Plus allows you to switch between the 2 at any time. Thank goodness for that. Gives me a chance to use my remixes that I made for the songs too, so that's nice. The game is very special to me, and the purpose of this third playthrough in this essay here is not to ascertain why, but rather to showcase it, because I already know why. So it's new ground for the channel. Thank God though, because it's New Game Plus and I can walk through the annoying waves of enemies this time, silver linings. Even the world in this game is genius. A video game world has never made me feel more free and liberated, yet simultaneously boxed in like Scarlet Nexus. It can land on either one at any time, regardless of where in the world you are, but it does pass by each end of the spectrum as it pertains to geographical archetypes. And I ain't just talking about the weather, like how you've got your token snowy level and your underground area. I mean in terms of space and time, distance. You have the cramped underground dungeon of the subway, both large and imposing with all the requisite freedom that such a space affords, but when you run into a bunch of enemies it suddenly becomes cramped and claustrophobic on account of the occupation of that video game space. But then comes the genius use of that space in another way, when you get to the long stretch towards the end of the place and barely any enemies accost you, at least relative to the preceding elements of that area. You also have the abandoned highway, with its echoes of civilization, a place open and empty, but confined in the way that the narrow nexus of roads also is. But its empty nature lends itself to that freedom, because the rush hour traffic has been gone for centuries. Nature has imposed itself upon the place once more, and especially in conjunction with the elevated platforms relative to how high up in the city that it is, how far off into the distance you can observe, and how far away you are from all the endless day-to-day toil and exaggerated minutiae of the cities of the world. Soon enough, you'll realize that the cities in this game are crazily atmospheric, and you can get sucked into it just like that. There's just something about the world, man. There's just something about the world. I don't know what it is. So now I'm just going to take you on a guided tour to those of you who care to join me. I'm going to show you why Scarlet Nexus is one of the most special things ever to be created. Sitting on the precipice of the story now, I have to praise the game's story in general, but mainly for its narrative and how it works in two brilliant ways that go beyond all of the geopolitical tension and all the wanky time travel stuff, a sort of unseen side, hence the name Scarlet Nexus, meaning red bond. And to quote one of the directors, objects or persons connected with red lines represent a big part of the visuals and key art of the game. So this esoteric cutscene style isn't just cool and doesn't just save on the budget, but also has a legitimate reason. Those red strings represent the very core nature of the game. I also like that they're not static either, but constantly in motion, flowing silently across the borders of the screen. Makes everything feel alive in a subtle and understated way. On the surface, it's about finding a new future for yourself, reconciling with your past, at least to the point of being able to live with it and moving forward, while exploring the ways in which people go about that, from the simpler elements to the more extreme lengths that it can take us to. But beneath that surface, it also tackles the existential dread of feeling as though you have nothing to live for, as well as trying to find that something. Assuming it's out there to begin with, the game's target demographic is a mystery to me, but I can guess that older bastards like me will appreciate it a lot more. Look out of its narrative and how strongly it sticks to it. I'm not looking to alienate any younger people. I'm just saying you don't really know the burnout of life until you've been rained on by quite a few decades. In this game, they all find something, these characters, mainly due to each other. And it's not always explicitly stated, but even when it is, it's done maturely and it's done tastefully, in a way that sort of betrays the usual JRPG conventions of feeling as though they were written for emotionally stunted, sex-obsessed demographics that other soulless JRPGs pander to and ruin themselves for, debase themselves in a way. Scarlet Nexus doesn't chase trends, doesn't do all that cringy crap, and it's all the better for it. Upon booting up the game, you're given the option to select from our two protagonists, Anime Boy, Anime Girl. We go Anime Boy first because left to right keeps my OCD happy, and it's the most exciting way to play the game, in my opinion. Yuito Samuraigi, Anime Boy. Sometimes the absolute worst character ever, and sometimes so likable it's hilarious. Immediately we're treated to a bunch of screens attacking us. This will be important later, but for now, it's just nice to fit us over in the 1990s. In the CRT TV store, we see totally not Kasane telling us we have to live no matter what. They go in the cold open route. In the present day, we're put right into it, lined up like fodder alongside our mate Nagi and a bunch of others, and it's just your standard everyone gets stabbed with tentacles anime scene. Nothing unconventional. This is the struggle arms system, aka SAS, you'll hear it a lot, and it's linking us to our allies so we can use each other's powers in battle. It's a really cool system. Powers are the constant in this game's world and lore, and we use them with our brains via technology that augments said powers. It is a really cool concept. It's a brain-to-brain connection because this game is brain punk. Quotation marks, that's what they said, brain punk. Honestly, it's kind of cool. I like it. Now, admittedly, I'm conflicted. I want to see this touted as revolutionary by anyone because, while on the one hand, the brain punk aesthetic is a diabolically fucking cool idea, they don't ever go in depth with the brain. Barely a mention of the different functions of the brain and their corresponding names, rather an over-reliance on the connectivity aspect, alongside a bit of brainwashing as we go along in the story. That said, it's a fresh new idea. It really is, that I've not seen before. And they're at least all in with the aesthetic of it all. And the connectivity thing does go hand in hand with the narrative constructs revolving around the bonds that we build with our friends as we go along. Because it's a JRPG. The power of friendship is eternal. That's just how this shit works. Our boy Yuito is the only one who takes the tentacles like a man, without passing out. So immediately he stands out because once again, JRPG. On the topic of aesthetics, the tutorial here is interwoven wonderfully within the confines of the game's world space, and it immediately grows a new dimension by showing exactly how manipulated Yuito's brain, and I guess ours too, can be now that we're hooked up to this system that we know nothing about, because it's exciting, and that's very apparent when the walls of the game's physical space erode and make way for a lovely transition into the highway, one that will be a full level later with a fantastic soundtrack. The world as we know it and perceive it is fluid, it's malleable, and it's overwhelmingly dynamic. It's a good prelude for how much you can add to a world and colour it with this kind of aesthetic vibrancy. Immediately, Scarlet Nexus just stands out for this reason and many more. This is our aptitude test, and the game really isn't taking its time, but I am, and this is a perfect segue into combat for Scarlet Nexus. The substance shows in how their powers are reflective of their personalities and their themes, and the themes of the game, and the style, consequently, comes in the form of the excellent cut-ins and the overall impact of each move. Sound design, art design, they do the heavy lifting in areas like these. These are the little things that make things engaging long term. These are the things that add up, the little micro things, into a grand macro fuck off thing that's just incredible and hooks you into the game. Actually, it still hasn't let me go and it's been about 2 years, never mind. Feels quicker than it is, more about timing than button mashing, cool powers, chaining combos, good flow. Throwing things is done with your psychokinesis. There are also contextual moves that will typically do much more damage, but take longer to execute. Very much worth it, even without the added damage, due to how mind-numbingly fun they are to set into motion. And throwing things is indeed at the forefront of your arsenal of attacking options, given that Yuito and Kasane's power is psychokinesis. It is as fun as it sounds. There are other methods of attack, the main counterpart being the melee attack, and a combination of those two main aspects of offense is the best way to squeeze all of the juice out of this battle smoothie. Rising Slash lets you take on aerial enemies, and that purple flickety flam is the psychokinesis gauge. If it depletes, use normal attacks to charge it. Simple enough. The key to doing well, I guess, in this game is utilizing the rush follow-up attacks that rely on timing the normal and psychic attacks just right. Meanwhile, you can use a sword spinning melee move as well, so if something's so intuitive and easy, you'll always have a way of breaking through a tough enemy, provided you think it through first. For a game wherein the primary combat mechanic is to physically throw vehicles and other stuff at your enemies to dispatch them, there's a surprisingly nice variety of skills and upgrades to choose from in here. This is where our points go, so what I'm hopefully putting on screen right now is a more fleshed out version of it later in the game. You can reallocate all of your brain points upon starting a new game plus as well. So if there's something you really wanted but missed, this is a great way to go ahead and grab that. Brain Drive and Brain Field are enhancements, essentially, but while the Brain Drive is a special combat state that enters you into a battle trance of sorts, Brain Field is like the next phase of that. It's optional as well. I'd recommend saving it for particularly stubborn enemies. It'll take ages without it, because it does massive damage in a sort of simulation with your enemies. I don't know if it's actually interdimensional, if I'm imagining it and I'm hallucinating, or if perhaps the brain is playing tricks on our protagonist, but in this mode, you're given the opportunity to do insane damage on even the biggest and baddest enemies in the game, all while your character loses their mind, laughing while they wreck everything around them. Defensive purposes, of course. Your time here in this state is limited, but it can be extended via certain skills as you progress through the game. I've talked about it before. A good battle system isn't about simplicity or complexity, turn-based versus action. It's all just about intuition, dynamism, fun, addictiveness, evolving as you play, allowing you to do things simply or complexly, but basically just facilitating the idea for you to do it in the way that you please. And you can use the same moves the entire game if you want to, still complete it. But if you want to go deeper, you'll find there is an absolute glut, just a plethora of things that you can do, and you will be rewarded for it, especially on harder difficulties. You'll ultimately find yourself timing it tactically, the Brain Drive and the Brain Field, for certain larger enemies, since at a certain point, it is kind of wasted on weaker enemies. And I'm using the analogy for what might be the 10,000th time since I started doing essays. It's like using a Master Ball on a Pidgey. One day I'm going to do a video on Pokemon and I'm actually going to use my Master Ball on a Pidgey and just make it come full circle. On the topic of abilities, you can also call on those of your teammates, borrowing them temporarily on a timer. These are fantastic. These include, in no particular order because I couldn't be bothered, Kyoka's special ability, Duplication. Enjoy this existential nightmare and intrinsic lack of inner philosophical unity as you do twice the amount of damage. Hypervelocity with Arashi is very stupidly fun to use. While it's quite short-lived, it grants you the ability to move at lightning fast speed. Thankfully, this is implemented in a very sensible way that doesn't give you a seizure, and that the world slows down in lieu of you actually speeding up visually. It'll allow you to get through timed doors that you'd be too slow for otherwise, and it's just really cool to slow down the world. I love the visual effect that they do as well. They put so much effort into making everything look good. It's Kino, man. Shitter's Electrokinesis is one of the two less cool abilities, but it's very useful if an enemy gets hit with the water status effect. It's not particularly flashy or memorable, but having powers based on utility, alongside the more crazy ones, maintains that balance, a very delicate balance of fun and efficiency in your power options. It's good to have that in combat. In that vein, Hanami's Pyrokinesis is as no nonsense as Shitter's, except it's fire instead of electric, so if an enemy's been covered in oil, this will absolutely wreck them. Tsugumi's Clairvoyance is visually brilliant and it allows you to see enemies that would otherwise be invisible, whether it be the enemy's innate ability to become unseen or a cloud of fog, for instance. It also makes visible to you the weak points of enemies, which can dramatically expedite a battle. It's quite conditional and specific, given that you only use it for invisible enemies and weak points, and weak points are easy enough to fight anyway, given that the sheer number of attacks you can do per battle are quite high. So this will probably be the least used power that you have. Funnily enough, invisibility isn't just for the enemies, we can do it too. Enter Kagero, who can not only get us past enemies undetected by turning us invisible, but also has a high-powered stealth move, wherein you can attack while unseen, doing very large amounts of damage. It's kind of understated, but it's a very fun one to use, and it can really speed things up for you. Luca's teleportation. It has functions inside and outside of battle. Inside of it, you can use them to hit an enemy you otherwise wouldn't be capable of reaching from your current spot on the field, and doing a nice amount of damage as well. Outside of battle, it'll allow you to clip through certain glowing walls to access otherwise unobtainable items, and just advance in general. And finally, Sclerokinesis, which I'm probably butchering. It's Gemma's move, and it may seem boring, and I know it ain't flashy and fun, but it is a perfect defensive power that nullifies all attacks for a brief period of time. Maybe you need time to find the right healing item, and Gemma's power is ready to use, or maybe you're just getting the absolute crap kicked out of you. This is going to be one of your go-to powers for combat. Plugins act as augmentations, and some provide resistances while others double your experience, or make it so that you can't die. It's super easy mode type stuff, basically, and I'm all for it. I like the idea that you could go for that if you really want to. There are many other components to combat, like status effects that are quite unique, such as oil, which stops you from dodging and can make you get burned easier. But I focused on the things that make combat fun, as opposed to a comprehensive review of it all. So in that vein, it's just fun in general. It's just mind-breakingly fun, the combat. Putting together normal attacks with psychokinesis and combining them by following either one up with the other, destroying the biggest enemies in the brain field where your character goes literally crazy, and that dopamine and serotonin rush when you've been wailing on an enemy for minutes and you can finally see the L2 prompt pop up letting you know it's time to finish him off in the most cinematic way. It's all in service to being addictive and rich and rewarding and just plain fun. It's not the most smooth, I won't pretend that it is, and it's certainly not the most fast paced, but it doesn't need to be. Not for what it is. What it lacks in speed it makes up for in impactfulness. What it lacks in smoothness it makes up for with visual goodness. Like all of the colourful explosions and how they mix together with everything else on the screen, the perfect synthesis. It's a good example of the game's style, and if you're a combat-oriented gamer, you're going to have a lot of fun with this, most likely. Aptitude test complete, and we're going to be a new OSF member as of tomorrow. I remember actually very vividly thinking that this had the dangerously generic potential to be yet another anime high school game with a military coating, but thankfully it sidestepped that genre and moved swiftly into a more mature story fairly quickly. Nagi's outside and he's over being knocked out by a tentacle. He's the happy best friend archetype, and sometimes I feel like his only real function in the story is to highlight how cool Yuito is and then die. Yuito, meanwhile, avoids the Gary Stu self-insert dilemma on account of simply being interesting enough on his own and having actual depth, so I guess that was another fear of mine that was born of the early game section here, but that was ultimately very much alleviated eventually. And the OSF is the other suppression force. We'll see the others soon, and we're here with our psionic powers to fight them. The OSF are the elite, the best of the best, and the best of them are called the Septentrians. You'll notice right away actually that among the many unique elements of the game, even the cutscenes are done in a pleasantly odd way. It's like every audio and visual element in a game all come equipped with instructions demanding that they serve the narrative and the aesthetic, or they ain't allowed into the game's code. It's like they're banned from it if they don't. We get a still shot of the characters and the world in the middle, and little windows of their faces where they actually move their mouth. So it's not quite a visual novel or a real-time thing, more a middle ground. But when something interesting or important happens, the game will go into a full real-time cutscene. They do have them sometimes. I don't know if they wanted to emphasize certain things more. And those red strings, very important, symbolizing the characters' connections in many ways that we'll get into. Even the picture in the center glitches occasionally. Yuito's thinking about the future, and it was funny to see because I already wrote in the notes that that's the main focus of every character in this game. He mentions that somebody saved him, no doubt Kasane from earlier. Alright, spoiler warning, it was. And he's already thinking about other ways to save other people's lives. One step at a time, kid. Maybe grow some pubes first. Nagi calls Yuito Mr. Yuito, which I'm guessing is a play off of Yuito-san. And it's as awkward as it sounds. I don't know why localizers are so allergic to Japanese honorifics. JRPGs aren't made for normies, bro. Just put them in. Use the honorifics. Persona does it, and anyone who doesn't get it can get filtered for all I care. Search engines exist, and so does common sense. But hey, if you're not learning Japanese yourself, whether you like it or not, you are just playing officially licensed fanfiction. So it is what it is. Ever since the localization black pill hit me, I've been overly mindful of the cringiness of any localization job. But it's all about intent, authenticity, whether or not they're doing it earnestly. So as all of that stuff goes, This one isn't particularly awful or cringy. Admittedly, not the highest standard to hold a creative work to, but this is the waking world in which we fucking live. The best you can hope for is a localized game that the localizer prioritized authenticity for, as opposed to deliberate and narcissistic vandalization of the creator's original work. What a high bar. It's odd, because I'm analysing this cutscene way more than I will any other, but Nagi mentions Samuraigi tomb, and that's Yuito's surname, so Yuito's Gary Stu tendencies do go up a bit here, but still not quite Gary Stu-ito. Funny though, because his family literally founded the country of New Himuka, in which this game takes place alongside Serene, and so New Himuka is the Samuraigi's domain. I'd lament that he's on the edge of unrelatability, but he's also 16, so I'd be worried if he wasn't anyway. It's quickly established that Yuito has a distant relationship with his dad, and that said dad is a politician. His brother is the chief of the OSF. Nepotism is going to take us to the top.
The city vision projectors must be broken. They're pretty, kind of scary.
Yeah, it's like they're looming over there.
I used to think futuristic digital designs were at variance with the natural beauty of the world, but the two actually go really well together. It's like music in that sense, it's just all about balance between the natural and the synthetic. I love digital things because they can showcase the natural world and provide a digital alternative. And Scarlet Nexus's world is a beautiful representation of when you strike a perfect balance between these two distinct but also identical archetypes. The overlay acts as a constant reminder of the synthetic, but the snowy mountains, for instance, contrast wonderfully with that. I probably uttered some variation of the term archetypal geographical diversity at least 10 times under this name, and that's once more now, because the game does it right. But I'll take it one area at a time to keep the flow of the video nice and smooth. Best metaphor I have for playing the game and the effect it has on my psychology is that it's like the mental equivalent of the visual effects that I use in videos. It just combines its sights and sounds in a way that makes everything pop a lot more than otherwise it would, but never in a way that causes an overload, which is difficult to do. A lot of games end up doing that. They throw too much in there and they don't balance it out well enough with the other elements. This game, on the other hand, is really masterful in how it organizes all of these different colors and shapes to create something that stands out so much but not too much at the same time. And because of this, the game makes me feel alive in a way that I don't think any other game has really done in a long time. To illuminate it in a more abstract way, admittedly, there's an ethereal, purgatorial ambience that runs through every facet of the experience. The world is open to you pretty much for the duration, with only a few little exceptions, meaning the lack of an open world doesn't really box you in at all. And I've got a lot of gratitude for that, for Bandai not making this an open world game, and instead segmenting everything into their own separate levels. But I'm even more grateful for the fact that traveling between these areas is made as simple as a really simple ass fast travel feature that lets you choose from not only the combat areas, but also the main city hubs as well. Just a press of a button. The segmented areas actually give me PlayStation 2 vibes. I suppose the size of the areas do as well. You can tell they made a decidedly conscious decision to have levels not be too large, but given the increased size of those levels as the game progresses, I do wonder if that's actually a decision made in service to the general fast-paced nature and tone of the game, as opposed to memory limitations or whatever other curveball that game development might throw at you when designing a level for players to run around in. It speaks to the gameplay cycle in general. Always having somewhere to go, even if it's entirely unrelated to the main story sections. Segmented levels keep things fresh and interesting, and they stop things from getting overwhelming. Much better than an open world, anyway. If anything, the PS2 vibe comparison stands nice and tall here because it's actually much more reminiscent of an open world PS2 game, back when maps were a lot less populated and a lot smaller, but felt really large because despite the fact that you could easily run from one side to the other in about 5 to 10 minutes, if the adrenaline kicked in, they were very small, comparatively speaking to what we have now. In terms of aesthetic, I don't think it's quite cyberpunk, but future punk might work. The variance in the world is very rich, and no other game can touch its aesthetic in terms of uniqueness. Usually when I see futuristic elements, I think, ugh. But much like Gemma in his character arc, learning to accept and even appreciate and maybe even love certain aspects of this new take on living, I've grown to appreciate this as well. In our real world, digital technology has largely left the world feeling cold and hostile in many ways, with humanity arguably more divided and atomized than we are brought together by it. But this game's world, and the way in which it brings people together with technology, reminds me that it doesn't always have to be this way. Characters communicate via their brains in a sort of brain group chat accessible via the pause screen, so that's nice. Seeing the wholesome bonding moments of the characters, both in separate bonding events with specific characters, but also in group events, and just the story in general makes all of the digitality seem warmer, I guess. I'll admit I made the correlation in my mind in almost inexorable thought, this idea that technology is always this dividing force, but maybe it won't always be in the grand scheme, and maybe I need to open my mind a little bit. The projections and the LED screens and the holographic boards placed around the city, they're very vibrant, and they add a vibrancy to the city that's already there and only heightens it. As concepts go, it's like the little brother of Psycho Pass, the anime. I do lament somewhat that the potentially dystopian nature of the game wasn't fully realised, but perhaps that wasn't the direction they wanted to go in. And to be honest, sometimes I'm kind of glad they didn't. There is, however, conflicting evidence against that compromise though, considering there's an evil, shadowy government doing all manner of awful things to certain people, such as Nagi, whose entire story is miserable to think about. We'll get there when we get there. All in all though, to sum up the world, it might be the most unique one I've ever seen in a game, and it's certainly one of my favourites, and we'll explore it as we go along. It's alright, isn't it? And so we start with Suo City. Beautiful area. Opening areas forever hold the ability to immediately make a point to the player, let us know exactly what we're getting into. The sights and sounds of a game's first city or town are the ultimate tone setter. The tone here is one of excitement, sense of impending adventure, beckoning you out of the city and also pulling you into it all at the same time. The imposing verticality certainly plays a part in that via the size of the buildings. Among other things, the holographic projections all over the place stand out wonderfully, but they're not too bright or too loud. It's that balance of excitement and coziness made visible. It's a visual manifestation of the almost inordinately high levels of ambition that hamstrung the game, while also elevating it in other ways. The soundtrack is vibrant and innocent, reflective of our naive characters at the start of their new journey. It's very science fiction oriented, but also very Japanese in other areas. It's an interesting mix that leads you to potentially discovering something new about it each time you return. The indoor areas like Musubi's are super futuristic and feel like a bit of a fever dream. That's especially in contrast to the surprisingly non-assuming colour palette of the outer area of Suo. It's a lovely balance. Looks hand-drawn in the more distant areas that you can't quite access, but everything you can access is fully 3D. It's a pleasant liminal space between pure juxtaposition and synthesis, and the fact that I can't quite ascertain what I'm looking at sometimes keeps the intrigue alive. Yeah. Also, items are floaty neon green cubes, which is very cool. It's nowhere near as large as it looks in terms of explorable areas, but it's a good use of space in that it doesn't need to be all that large. And I think that would be detrimental, actually. The city's alive with ambience and it's well worth hopping into photo mode to stop and look around a bit. It's unerringly vibrant and it carries with it the positive vibe that this game has all the way through it, even in the harder moments, even in spite of all of the background tension, I guess you could say. I think I once said that this area and its music remind me of a Tony Hawk game before he died inside. What a beautiful recollection. You can even knock the bikes over. Once again, developers who give random objects physics are my favourites. It's really fun to knock things over in games. Why not, right? I'll make mention of the UI and the HUD while I still can. That's user interface and heads-up display. The things on screen, essentially on-screen elements. They are the perfect balance of sweet to look at and colourful, but not too overbearing or cluttered, as I said earlier. But this happens even in battle, wherein there's a dedicated character cut-in for every use of every power. It's tasteful, it stands out, but it doesn't overextend itself and result in a migraine aura. In that sense, it's just like the world we inhabit in the game. The soundtrack here reflects all of this with some innocuous sounding tones. The whole OST is timeless, it's unique and dynamic. See, those are 3 good words, great words, and they still don't get across how incredible the soundtrack actually is. I looked up the members of the Scarlet Nexus sound team and found that, shockingly, they haven't worked on all that much, although they occasionally put out songs that seem completely different. And it's odd considering how good the OST is. Electronic trance and D&B stuff, heavy metal, distorted guitars, ethereal blast beats in a way that has no right to work as well as it does, but actually very much does. Spectral ambient moments in between the songs. Some of it sounds like it's from another dimension, another time, deep into the future, or as far back as the early 90s or something, out of a Streets of Rage game. Hustle X Fade sounds like a straight out of Streets of Rage 2. Tell you what, the best way to describe music that goes beyond my comprehension is to just let it play during a video. I respect it very much for even trying to blend all of these genres together, and I still have no idea how they actually managed to make it work. As if it wasn't enough to have one of the greatest soundtracks of all time though, spanning multiple genres and mood swings all in one album. The depth of content from the sound team is insane. You have versions of songs for when you use the brain drive, versions that omit certain instruments. There's even versions for when you're on the pause menu, and they'll apply a low pass filter to the track to make it sound like it's underwater or something. And every track is like its own character, with its own little family of corresponding versions of itself. It's incredible. I shall detail them. Since we're wandering around Suo at this point in the story, you could very fairly look at side quests in Scarlet Nexus and say they're underwhelming, since they're just fetch quests. But as someone who'd rather have no side quests at all, than half-baked ones that demand I invest inordinate amounts of time into underdeveloped NPCs and force myself to care about them, usually failing. This game just drops the pretense and says, yeah, side quests here are just fetch quests. We won't make a big deal out of them, we won't annoy you with really long cutscenes and pretend they matter. Go out, kill others, explore places. Bring back the thingies, get a reward. I think it trusts in itself enough and how fun it already is without the superfluous fluff. And of course, it'd be great to have side quests that are brilliant and have that middle ground, you know, that happy medium. I can count on one hand the side quests I even remember from any game I ever actually enjoyed enough to remember. There's one in Skyrim, a few in Nier Automata, and I'm sure there are others. As long as the main story and character bonding episodes, provided the game has enough to begin with, are good enough that I don't mind at all. In fact, it's kind of a blessing, actually, to not have to worry about such things and simplify certain aspects of a game in lieu of overly complicating them to the point wherein you know the devs are just padding something out to fit the almost univocal criteria for that JRPG quota. Like I said, man, it's the anti-JRPG. One of the main things I love about it. You could argue that the game is lacking dynamism as it pertains to side quests in general, and sure, that's absolutely true. But you could also theorize that the reason behind this might just be because it trusted enough in its core elements of the main story and character writing to not have to bother with them. It's a good reason to go out exploring, beyond simply leveling up and getting new things, knowing that anything you pick up could help you out. I guess what I'm saying is it's okay for a game to not bother too much with side quests, because I think they're overrated, and usually crap anyway. So either don't include them or make them stupidly simple and just bake them into the game in a way that makes sense. Scarlet Nexus does that. And it's another incentive to go out and explore the world, gathering materials. There's a place for grinding in games, and I think that that place is much better off situated in the optional stuff. Speaking of which, perfect time to talk about outfits now. You get outfits with materials too. The stuff you can wear is one of the coolest things about the game and its general style. The aesthetic is like tech wear, with all its baggy and brightly coloured and neon stuff. Perfect. The only downside is that you can't see what something looks like from the menu when you buy it. The menus actually are a little esoteric at times, so this is just another manifestation of that. But you can either save and reload to see what something looks like, or just look online. The wiki has pictures of each one. Alongside these are the incredible variety of accessories that you can get as well. There's a trophy for putting the Barky head on everyone, so the game knows how fun this stuff is. Not enough games have customization like this, but this one understands the importance of personalization and how it can help a player bond even more with the game. So you have everything from cool stuff to silly stuff to funny stuff, with boots, gloves, hats, all sorts. I mean, look at how I've got Yuito looking. It looks silly, but also cool. What's coolest about it is the cyberpunk aesthetic showing up in how futuristic everything looks, and it balances perfectly with the unique art style that has the really expressive faces as well. And since we're doing segues, speaking about expressive faces, anywhere at any time, any facial expression you think of with any character, you can grab a photo of it. The only downside is that the prompt to enter photo mode never, ever disappears from the bottom of the screen during cutscenes. It's like, I really love and appreciate that they let you take photos during cutscenes as well as gameplay. It's a great feature and it gives me thumbnail ideas for this video in fact, but the option to hide it would have been very much appreciated. This was a terrible oversight. Gee, I don't know what they were thinking. Still, photo mode allows you to look at the environment, but all the while escaping the third person over the shoulder camera and letting the world breathe a little. Things like this make games better, I think, and never suffer for it. These quality of life features all add up in the end, and every great game is a combination of loads of little things that just add up and up. That's this game in a nutshell, to be honest. Scarlet Nutshell. The Samuraigi tomb is collaborating with Barky, the game's mascot that Yuito is obsessed with. He's a floaty pink poo, like Mog from Final Fantasy XIV 2. Now, we communicate as stated with our minds. It's like the old school MSN Messenger, but in your head. Behold the recorder. Satori, the archivist. This sentient bumblebee will save your progress manually. The game has an autosave, but it's kind of retro to take this approach, as opposed to shoving it in the main menu. He's also the game's merchant, so grab any free DLC from him. And later on, be sure to check in periodically to see what cosmetic costumes and hats he has, because it's very fun. He'll also say something each time you see him, which updates, I think, with each story advancement. He kind of has his own mini-arc that's fun to keep track of. I like the recorder. Since the Samuraigi tomb is the game's first taste of the modern and traditional aesthetic fusing together into one, you have a family grave that might typically be a forlorn place, but in Suo, it's a tourism hotspot. The man in the grave is Yakumo Samuraigi, the founding father, who apparently saved humanity from the spring of extinction. It's capitalized. We've got lore. It was 2,000 years ago, and he was a masked mystery man because that's a JRPG. You know how games love to do fortune-telling scenes? Yeah, very bad luck for both of us. In the city centre, the others make their first appearance, and they are gross. Prevalence of caution signs is a really intelligent way though to throw the theme at you. With the holographic stuff, the OSF move in with heavy weaponry and just launch at them. Really shows how seriously they take these alien thingies. The Scarlet Guardians turn up with cool music so you know that they're important. It's Fubuki Spring and Karen Travers. Yeah, he's a Karen. It sucks because every Karen I've ever known is actually really lovely, so I hate that the names become a meme. The hierarchy of the OSF is established nice and early too. These two will obviously go into WrestleMania. The NPCs are marking out for him instead of literally running away to safety. So Yuito and Nagi decide to be heroes. We get to take out a few, but he ends up flat on his ass. With some assistance from Kasane, he's able to grab the win. This game ain't messing about, you know. It knows you know that Kasane is the one from our boy's vision earlier. Nagi turns up again, having got his ass handed to him. Naomi saved him. She's Kasane's sister, and seems nicer than Nagi deserves, so of course Nagi thinks that he has a chance of a redhead chick, that'll be Arashi, appears out of literally nowhere, wondering what's up, and we're surrounded by drones. Not to kill us, mind you, but to hound us for an interview. They're the press, as visualized by drones, acting like vultures. Whoever said anime isn't realistic, eh? Luca, Karen's brother, appears and he uses his power to teleport us out of trouble. He's a Septentrian, so do not be fooled by his diminutive stature. He's a unit. We enter a group Zoom call from the COVID era, and he tells us off, saying cadets aren't allowed to fight others. Kasane's cool here. Her first bit of proper dialogue in the route, most people will likely choose first, and she's straight up giving it back to the senior guy, saying, well, OSF's in charge of keeping people safe in the first place, right? Luca has no comeback, he lets it slide. I only mention this because it's a good early tell of how much humility that he has. Interesting note too, the bodies of the deceased are censored. The SAS system censors our brains and obscures the sides that we might not want to see to preserve our mental health. If this was written by Orwell or Huxley, they'd have a field day with that, but not so much here. The heads are missing, essentially, because others eat human brains. We report back to anime headquarters, and it's the bloody press again. Everyone's all here, and introductions are made. This is where the game's diverse array of personalities all convene for the first time. It's very funny. Shit has already given us shit. The characters are a huge part of the game's overall strength, and we'll explore them in great detail later on. And that is Yuito's Phase 0. No BS, just straight to the point. Typically, and always in your first playthrough, you just continue on. But for us, it's Kasane's route now. We've got a zigzag. Kasane Randall. Anime girl. Kasane's intro is wildly different, as instead of seeing Yuito's vision of her, we see older, alternate timeline Yuito. It's a much more interesting start and immediately has a much darker tone. Other than that, it's very similar, with the tentacles and the tutorial. Instead of Yuito and Nagi, it's Kasane and Naomi getting their fortunes as Baki watches on omnipotently from his ethereal god plane. I feel like the game strikes a good balance between things we've already experienced and, as we progress, things that are completely outside of the realm of the other playthrough. The more wild deviations. Similar enough and different enough to stay interesting, I guess is the crux of what I'm saying. We then get the other attack and we get hounded by the press too. Sato is our commander and we meet Hanabi, childhood friend. Nagi again, still a dork. Kagero, a confident guy. Wataru, Otacon basically. And Tsugumi, the world's smallest giant. It's a simple mission in Kikuchiba to reach the end of the area, a sort of a training exercise, and Kagero and Tsugumi have a little chat, so you can already tell they're close. It's a simple way of building character dynamics, but it never feels like a conversation is wasted in the game, even during the little moments of dialogue during gameplay. They all add something. Contextual moves in combat are introduced, and combat's already in a state of evolution, so while I am in New Game Plus with everything unlocked, on your first playthrough, you'll find this to be implemented in a very progressive way that feels fair and balanced. Many games just front load you with far too many things, I've noticed, especially modern mods, so I very much appreciate this. Togetsu is actually mentioned really early on, I'd forgotten that. They're likened to a cult, of which Kagero was a priest. We'll go there later and realise it's a lot more complex than that. By complex I mean weird. Boss battle's difficult if you ain't on New Game Plus, but it also showcases how fun and dynamic boss battles can be, with the game placing giant structures above the boss arena that you can trigger and crush the enemy with, but only when they're in the correct position for it. So it requires a level of foresight to make sure you can persuade the other to move into place. Or conversely, you can just defeat it the normal way, even if it takes a bit longer. Dynamism. Dynamism in combat is good, and crushing things with giant objects is very fun. Tactics and addictiveness. Perfect combo. The press finds us and harasses Yuito about how cool he is, and then Tsugumi spots some more coming along before they actually do, thanks to her clairvoyance power. The game takes the individuality of the characters and their powers, as well as how they interweave with their personalities, very seriously, and it immediately makes the characters stand out more.
Yeah, fine. Do whatever you want.
Love you, Captain.
Connect 4 meets Cosmology. I love this place. Kikuchiba. It feels like you're on top of the world, but that world is being stood on by another, larger, more imposing world that gravity forgot. Deserted and dilapidated cities and areas in Scarlet Nexus are a common theme, and this is the first of them so far. I feel as though it shouldn't feel as cozy as it does, but that's this game for you. Everything's crumbled and it's infested with others, and the remnants of a city similar to Suo can be felt in its layout. So it's a nice counterbalance to have this entropic take on the opening area, positioned so close to it in relativity. Broken projections of broken buildings above lit up the sky in a way that casts a constant shadow of doubt on the innate and inherent realities around you, and it certainly keeps me on my toes. It's just an architectural malaise, but even then it's pretty, and that's what matters, right? It just needs to be nice to look at. The way the colour palette saturates itself into a green distance the further away you look is really, really special, I think. Another great addition is the half-broken nature of things, symbolised by the op projection here and there, like the LED shop signs, as though the stores next to them aren't in complete disarray and disrepair. Speaks to how technology that we create is designed to outlive us, in a way, and how it can sometimes take on a life of its own. And I've noticed a recurring theme among the most cinematic of the game's world spaces, and that's the gradual ascent, wherein getting from the start of a level to the end of it involves a slow climb to the top, with the level itself betting all its stock in the verticality of its own design. And even though Hieno Mountain quite a bit later on holds this distinction too, this one feels much higher up, not in spite of, but because of the broken projections above. So instead of making you feel low down, it has an opposite effect for me, at least in that it feels as though you could reach out and touch them. An intelligent aesthetic component is the red strings all tied up to the steel beams holding the place together. The City That Time Forgot is a great name for the song here, and it announces itself with some dulcet percussion before filling that audible space with a cavernous combination of strings that feels full enough to justify the endless looking landscape of the level. It implies a sense of wonder, I think, as though it's trying really hard to market to us how imposing it is, but remind us all the same that it's still pretty, and its destruction and its flaws. It might have been even prettier a long, long time ago. So it's like a fun level, I guess. Kyoko is training Naomi and Kasane. Kasane likes Seto, Naomi likes Yuito, Nagi likes Naomi, and I like Sleep Token. And I can't keep up with this. Honestly, a little bit of this romance stuff can be cute and funny, I guess, if you're in a good mood. Karen gives Yuito some advice, a shoulder pat, and has had an eye on him for a while. So we're going places. Arashi summons us to Mizuhagawa, that's hard to say, for assistance. It's a place that reminds me that while the game is fast paced, it often compels you to stand around and take it all in for a while. Maybe It's the Sunset could also be my favourite song of the soundtrack, called A Broken Promise, the song that convinced me to buy the game back in 2022. Gets me wondering, a long list of questions, the likes of which share in one intrinsic commonality, taking the form of a question. Why is it so pretty though? Why is it? The construction site itself is similar to Kikuchiba in that it's abandoned, but this one was half finished before an other attack, hence the abandonment of the project and its current state. The way the level works illuminates the way in which this level comprises and ultimately breaks free of its own self-imposed confines. You start the level at what seems like the bottom of the whole thing. After some battles, you ascend briefly as the sun becomes visible and lures you into the higher echelons of the world space, and then upon actually reaching the top, you realise the bottom is actually much further down. So, subversion of expectations is this game's bread and butter, and this level is a perfect microcosm of that. Looking down upon the area gives it a sense of metaphysical gravity that hasn't even physically pulled you down into it yet. Before it even catches up to itself as a concept, its abstractions draw you in, and they do so in the simplest of ways, with pure aesthetics and the warmth of the sun, which for all we know may even be a projection as well. You never really know with this game. I guess, at least sometimes, a diminished sense of reality can actually help to accentuate the beauty of something. Why else would we play video games to begin with? It speaks to the idea of letting go and getting lost in the moment, and this area, complete with the song, does that in a very smooth and addictive way, which often leads me back here with a sense of excitement, and I guess nostalgia now as well. It's crazy to think it's been nearly 3 years since I played this the first time. The area further down is nice and open, lots of space to explore and fight, and it contains many fun little contextual elements for combat, such as the digger. You can literally just make a digger run them over. It keeps things entertaining and new in terms of combat. As for the soundtrack, it encompasses the soundtrack itself as a whole in many ways. But I think it's really emblematic for the whole musical experience of the game. You got a bunch of different genres all rolled into one, but perfectly cohesive, and it makes the emotional connection within the first few seconds with that piano already, even before the saxophone comes in and the song mirrors the place in which it plays, simply by being so open and airy. It gives itself all the room in the world to breathe, and it's in no hurry. I think that's kind of Scarlet Nexus in a nutshell. It can be fast-paced, but it's in no hurry. Another reflection the music has of the level is that when the piano notes play, you're down in that cramped little opening area, and so the ascent up to the top is analogous to the ascent from the start of the musical piece to its big moment wherein it reveals its true nature. And I think it's this kind of synchronicity that gets me wondering how video game music is implemented and how much composers and other developers actually coordinate their approach, I guess is what I'm asking. Simply put, I wonder if the composers saw these levels first and took this into account, or if they just winged it based on a picture or perhaps concept art. The only indication of this I've ever seen was Stuart Copeland in an interview for how he composed the Spyro the Dragon soundtracks, in which he talks about how his own personal approach to composing involves getting his hands on the game and playing the levels first. Just makes me wonder, I suppose. The Hideout, from the start to the finish, goes from cold and empty to warm and lived in, and it goes through an evolution as you play, becoming its own character in a way, elevating the people who dwell in it and heightening the personal elements of the experience. The gifts you get your friends aren't only for the purpose of leveling up their bond level, but also serve the game's world, as most things do in this game. There's a beautiful synthesis in how all of these elements coalesce into one. And this is probably the most fun example. For instance, observe Luca's drone. He'll play with it when we're just chilling, and he loves observing the scenery with him outside as well. Hanabi will use her roller terribly, but those things are difficult though, so I can't blame her. Tsugumi's plants brighten up the room just as she does. Arashi's corner is a mess because she's lazy as hell, and so on and so forth. But these material additions add to the environment in other ways too. The little bits of charm and warmth, they all add up. As the characters interact with all of them, it's easy as hell to just put static things into a place, but giving them life means giving them context and animating them in ways that showcase personality in characters. And that's how you turn a place into its own character. Kyoka gives herself a massage. Kasane manipulates a ball of water for reasons. Gemma, Hanabi, Luca, Kagero, they train much of the time in the training room, which is also where you'll find Gemma and Kyoka just doing yoga stretches. Yuito just plops himself in that big stuffed cuddly thingy. Oh, it's a Baki. Well, there you go. Hanabi, as mentioned, splats the ground while failing to use her roller thingy correctly. Luca flies the drone around. As mentioned, Kagero occasionally turns invisible, so he's just a floating hat until you interact with him. Suchan tends to the plants and the flowers. Shita stands angrily and indignantly while plotting world domination and practicing his power form thingy. And Arashi is one with the couch. She just lounges on the couch. She's basically the human couch. It's brilliant. Each little thing adds up to the vibe of the group. So when you put them all together, it becomes a fun little game to see who's doing what every time you come back to the hideout. And it's this kind of thing that makes the gameplay loop easier to tolerate, even when it's a fairly predictable one that involves returning to the hideout after every major story section to engage in bonding episodes and do other little things. And this is also what makes the game feel alive. It makes the characters stand out. It gives the player another reason to engage with said world and the characters. And even the mechanics of the game, outside of the definitive and almost sterile axioms of every video game, you know, like the leveling up and all those other things that you do, just to make sure that you're ahead of the curve. Leveling, grinding, combat, so on and so forth. The game's got great pacing, and it always feels like it's going somewhere. But with this downtime, it allows itself to breathe, and the player is granted the same opportunity along with multiple reasons to do so. And yet even then it's not forced. You can just skip these things. I certainly wouldn't recommend that, but I dig player agency when it makes sense. I'm a big supporter of that kind of thing because every gamer is different. As mentioned earlier in the intro, like any game or piece of media, the crazy things may draw you in, but it's the little things that keep you around. Wait, did I remember to mention that? Well, I have now, either way. It's during Standby Phase 1 that we're introduced to bonding events, and we'll talk about them a little more later. But for now, they're really simple. Kasane's episode on Yuito's route does involve him probing her about the intro where Kasane saved him, but she thinks it's a dream due to the psychokinesis, which is both of their power. There's a lot of foreshadowing about all the fun time travel bollocks that we're going to be doing later on. Once again, Kasane's route is actually similar to Yuito's. As we meet the team and embark on a training exercise, Kyoka platoon is the warm and fuzzy platoon. Even if Seto's cool, Kyoka does have a go at Shita though for discriminating against other people, so she don't take those shit. Kyoka's a great character. I don't think I prefer any particular party, to be fair. Each have their own unique dynamics based on the people and the story beats, but Kasane's has much more friction and as a result much more entertainment value early on when it ends up feeling like a family later on. Kasune annoying shitter is always funny. She doesn't realise she's doing it at first because she's terrible with people, but even when she does figure it out, part of her growth is realising that it's fun to beat the shittiness out of Shitter. I like Shitter, by the way, Shiden Ritter. By the end I feel like his character arc is really rewarding, and he has goodness in him. He has a lot of funny moments too. It's just a great nickname for Shiden Ritter to call him Shitter. I can't be the only one who calls him it. I can't be. Somebody else must have called him Shitter. You can't pass that one up. Also, instead of Wataru being our Otacon, we get Haruka, his sister. So she's our female Otacon. The Mizuharuga portion is interesting because it's the same map in parts, but we also get access to other parts of the level. So it's one of the many ways in which the game keeps things interesting and fresh. Kodama shows up and she'll be a mystery in Yuito's route, so that's kind of funny. And I know there's a character section later, but Kyoka's Bond episode, where she gives us the protection charm, is S-rank Kino. It's one of my favourites. Yuito suddenly wakes up in Samuraigi tomb despite having just fell asleep at the hideout. It's a team exercise, split into 3, and we draw Kagero and Shitter. Shitter, once again real name Shiden Ritter, is very not nice and does not like us. We'll get into why during the character section. Anyway, we're the leader of the group, he doesn't like that, but it doesn't matter. Yuito's also Baki's #1 fan, so you know that he's like the manliest man for the job. It culminates with a battle between Yuito and Kasune, and it's really cool to fight against someone who also uses psychokinesis. An abandoned subway line. We get some lore about the extinction belt, an atmospheric barrier that covers the whole globe and blocks signals, and where it's thickest, others are most likely to appear. It's also the reason why the sky looks like it's had an oil spill. That's why you can't see the sky as well as you otherwise would. There's a beauty to how the sky looks even with it, but that does explain it. A concert of rainbow vomit on a black and white TV, the abandoned subway tunnels. You know, usually I'm not a fan of underground areas. If I wanted an absence of colour and warmth, I would go outside in real life in Great Britain, but this is Scarlet Nexus, so you know they'll find a way to make the place fun and to stand out. I can't tell you what Hustle X Fade means, sounds a bit like an STD, just that it's the name of the song here, and I remixed the hell out of it for the remix album I did about a year or 2 ago. I've been putting the songs in here, the whole video, to make people listen to it, whether they like it or not. But man, does it do a lot of the heavy lifting in here, the soundtrack I mean, which is fitting, you know, heavy lifting considering the insanely large train that you can push with your special psychokinetic move. This map though, it just goes on forever. This is actually one of my favourite areas in the entire game, and it is really weird for me to say that. It's cozy down here. Yeah, the monsters want us dead, the ceilings cave in from time to time, but that's just the way of the world. It's like whatever, innit? And the music sounds like Streets of Rage. It's synthetic enough to sound otherworldly, but it's melodic enough to keep it appealing to the human ear. Music for humans and others to enjoy in equal measure. As I mentioned a bit ago, the contextual battle elements of this one provide us with the ability to move massive trains along the tracks and destroy multiple enemies at once. It's glorious. It's glorious, man. Just massive destruction on such a satisfying scale. Much easier to connect with a world where you can actively manipulate it to help you navigate its virtual space. Picture perfect, man. The game is intent on one-upping itself, and I'm along for this ride. I will say also that the lack of colour down here hurts the game less, and that firstly, a lack of colour can be aesthetically pleasing, and Tsugumi's special power acts as a good example of this because that's actually really fun to look at. And second, everything else is colourful enough and actually stands out more and becomes more colourful as a result of that. The colourful user interface plays off of the more subdued colour scheme in this level, and opposites bring out the best of each other. Like black and white for instance, they look great next to each other. So the UI, the HUD, and the effects of the combat moves all come together to inject life in this place. All powered initially by the soundtrack that welcomes you in and then keeps you hooked with its frenetic nature, which mimics beautifully the fast-paced nature of the enemies in the place and the combat that naturally ensues within. And for some reason, this long stretch down here, I don't know why I'm so in love with it. I don't know what it is about this place. Maybe it reminds me of the Hanging Edge from Final Fantasy XIII. Could be that. I am hopelessly in love with that game. But I don't want to take away from this game. I think it's just a really nice area, and that it's so grand and cavernous, yet it's so cozy at the same time. Because of all of the lighting and how well it's done, and the placement of everything in here was so strategically orchestrated, and I really do appreciate that. I'm rambling. Oh yeah, the guy who makes 4-hour videos is rambling. What a novel concept. I did not expect them to kill someone off so quickly, and I guess they technically didn't kill her, but Naomi takes a bullet to save Kasune, and then turns her into an other, and it's really brutal. Not gory, just sad and visceral. The game took me by surprise with this one. It's like chapter 2, and they pulled out the dark shit already. Also, seeing Naomi Randall above the big, grotesque-looking other has a viscerality to it that's really unique, and the music is sinister too. It's really cool, in a really depressing way. Some dudes transport Naomi out of the place, and obviously they're up to something. We find some ambules, and it turns out she was shot with one and turned into another. And And then Fubuki says don't say anything about it. It's much the same with phase 2 of the other arc as well, with the training exercise in the abandoned subway where Naomi is turned into another. But the deviation is that Kodama attacks us for seemingly no reason, and Fubuki just says, "Can you let this slide?" My theory now is that every time we saw Fubuki it was actually Yuta, or at least occasionally was, who's Kodama's sister. Musubi's is a nice counterpart to the outer area of Suo City. Provides a lot more colour and brightness and even contrasts it in many ways, but it's also more cozy and intimate, so it all evens out in a very symmetrical way, at least in terms of the look and the feel of the place. Not much else to say about the place, it's very small. It's a joy to visit though, and some nice bonding events occur here. I dig it. I was informed of this Barky Tea Party, and the little silly things you can find here always make me feel chill. This song though, are you hearing it too?
I got a condo in Manhattan. Baby girl, what's happening? You and your ass in.
I can't be the only one who hears that, right? It's been doing my head in for like 2 years. 2.5 now, nearly 3. Even though it's fully explorable as a little area in which you can interact with NPCs, and I think pick up or turn in some side quests, and have some women tell you about the website and the interactive TV show thingy that isn't relevant anymore. Most of Musubi's prominence in the game is actually consigned to bonding, episode cutscenes basically, and so it shares the burden of being interesting enough to appear a hell of a lot of the time with the Hideout, and now neither will feel overly imposing in terms of how often they appear. I swear man, it's the understated nature of how this game does everything that makes everything pop so much and work so well. It's only when the game gets too ambitious that it suffers for it. And yeah, that's Musubi's. Unlucky for you, that's what I like. The arcs are basically borderline identical, save for a few things. Phase 3 is where things get crazy. But first let's talk about a cool place. We're taking the bus. I blew my load a little too soon earlier during the intro section of the game when I talked about the world, so I can't talk about how liberating this place feels for a second time, so I'll just mention that the general feeling for the place is very special. Abandoned Highway to Eden, being the name of the song, sort of clinches that idea that this was once a lively and probably stressful place with traffic jams, but now is just our playground of destruction. Always wanted to run full speed down a highway. I don't have to worry about cars running me down. No, instead it's us running down others with said cars, or a bus, I guess you could say. They still litter the landscape, accompanied by the overgrown trees and branches, slowly encroaching upon the roads that humanity once called their own. And it's like we're actually on top of the world, but the long, winding paths are really made to run up and down. And no, I haven't mentioned it yet, the running speed in this game is at that sweet spot wherein it doesn't disorient you. It's not too slow, but you still won't be asking for a turbo mode. Makes you feel like a human vehicle, I guess. And I suppose you are carrying the game forward with your hands and fingers, so hey, metaphor accomplished. We're a vehicle of destruction and we look good. Contextually, this area gives you the delightfully pleasant opportunity to blow up a tanker full of oil, as indicated by the presence of the liquid on the ground using a special move, but in keeping with this give certain levels their own gimmicks design, the highlight of the place is that you can also ride the bus all the way down the road, running down enemies and finishing it off with a big contextual move at the end, which actually leads into the area with the explosive tanker, so it's like one thing after another and they're placed very intelligently. And I didn't used to appreciate the spacing out of certain items in games until I watched a bunch of speedrunners play Spyro the Dragon for about 4 years, and I noticed, we're on Spyro again, aren't we? That's the second time I mentioned it, but I noticed how well placed the gems were in that game. The first one anyway. And now I have that reference point, because I realised that keeping a level fresh is an important component in games, and a great way to do that is to give things a flow, much like this, and that happens with spatial awareness. Visually speaking, it's an interesting contrast to see these concrete highways be reclaimed by the nature that they pushed aside to begin with. And nature is always juxtaposed by the artificial or man-made and the futuristic in this game. So this provides a nice antidote to that aesthetic for at least one level. The idea is that this particular vibe always hits with a greater impact when it does make its presence known and felt. The song's interesting because it's a really long one and it has sort of a pulse to it, like it's building suspense with something crazy. And it does keep building up and building up, but then near the end of the track, it breaks out into like this groovy jazz-like tune. It's like, okay, it just hits you out of nowhere. This place is unique, I guess, in that it subverts expectations across multiple avenues and dimensions of storytelling and exploration in a game, and you can throw cars at shit. We're called out to Cunard Highway. In the early game, it really is just others have been spotted in location X, go and do objective Y. But this incidentally is the chapter where everything goes mental. For instance, Nagi's been brainwashed in hospital and thinks that Naomi is dead, even though she's another. This is the first little hint of his brainwashing. Speaking of foreshadowing, I didn't notice this at first, but Kagero got weird earlier when Yuito talked about his dad. Looked like he was deep in pensive thought, which makes perfect sense considering he will soon assassinate the man. I never gave the game enough credit for these things, but I didn't know this, did I? I have an excuse. I'm stupid. Gamer accuses Seto of knowing about awful research. Everyone convenes and we fight off what's actually Karen's unit. He's doing a coup. The fight with him is unwinnable, but we're actually level 67 on a New Game Plus, so we can annoy him here for a few minutes at the very least. Nagi's passed out on the floor, and when he wakes up the brainwashing has taken full effect, and then he tries to kill us. Seto takes a hit for us like a champ, and he straight up dies. And I guess they really did kill someone off early. And it sucks because Seto's a character that's really likable, and it seems like he's got a lot of untapped potential. But it does at least get it across that anyone could die. Even if they're really likable, even if they're really cool, even if they've had funny moments, they could just die. And so the stakes are raised really early on. Every scene will now carry with it attention, wherein there's this subconscious knowing that this kind of thing can happen to anybody. Despite the upbeat nature of the game, Naomi turned into another, Seto died, and it's only chapter 3. Gemma doesn't want to fight anymore, and had doubts anyway, and a weird black swirly vortex thingy has appeared. As for Karen's coup, he hates New Humuka because they're trying to create a controlled society, and Nagi is a good example of the brainwashing they do to keep people controlled. They monitor people, they conduct experiments, and remember that Yuito's brother and dad are very high-ranking members of the government, so the Samuraigis are involved. Karen's rebellion affects Kasane's route in a different way, with Shiden saying he's joining it, and he tries to hold her hostage for Karen, but she's a pain in Karen's ass, and we just fight Shitter straight up, only to be rescued anyway. Despite Shitter being a shitter, we pretend he was just helping us, showing Kasane's willingness to forgive, even here. With someone so blunt and no nonsense, it's a good way to show that she's a nice person. Cunard Highway is much the same as well, barring a scene with Seto that makes his death even more painful. I still remember the fountain pen. Suo's been overrun by others, and the city shut down because the computer that controls the place has been shut down. It's up in Arahabaki, which we'll visit later. It's mental. Fighting through the city is brilliant with all the projections down. It shows just how much life they breathe into the city, by incidentally taking them away temporarily. After fighting through the city, we encounter Yuito's dad, Joe Samuraigi, but he's been stabbed and it looks like Kasane did it. She says Yuito's gotta die, so we gotta fight her. The brain field is finally introduced, and it's really awesome. After hitting a deadlock, Karen does a speech about how he's joining Seiran for his rebellion. We will escape, with the characters now split into two very distinct groups. It'll be this way for a good while now too. These are the two parties. And now we get into a part of the game that I genuinely dislike. In all of our favourite things, we usually have that one thing that pisses us off. And for me, it's the way Yuito is written for approximately half of the game, and it starts right here. He's too forgiving and understanding, to the point he comes across as a little mental. Like his dad's just been killed, and the group of Kasane, whom he thinks was the culprit, invite him to hang out, meaning Shitter and Kyoka, and he just accepts that and hangs out with them. Now thankfully, this kind of writing isn't prevalent throughout the entire game, but it does infect a great deal of it. He has no idea that Kasane was asked to kill him by future him, or that it was Kagura that killed his dad, but even then, it comes across as weird in terms of how it's paced. I think the writers just kind of figured, screw it, we just got to get this story moving, and they didn't want to put filler in, but for the first time ever, I think I'm actually advocating for a filler chapter here. Maybe writing a filler arc where Yuito learns to vent his frustrations by killing hundreds of others. He also is seemingly completely unfazed during the Bond episodes for this part. In Gemma's Bond episode, particularly, Yuito gets all excited about a cute little Baki, and I think what might have happened, this is just a theory of mine, is that the writers didn't account for the placement of Bond episodes relative to the context of the story at the time, at least sometimes. This dude ain't acting like a guy who just lost his dad, and Seto, and saw Naomi turned into another within the past few days. I mentioned this before, but Scarlet Nexus is as much a victim of its ambition as it is a beneficiary of it. Sometimes it gives the player incredible things, and sometimes, like right here, it manifests in ways that make you wonder if you've gone insane, or if the main character has, or maybe both of you at once. The overarching point here, from me, though, is that I still love the game, despite this. In fact, I think it's the fact that I'm able to look past this that speaks more highly of the game's better parts than I ever could with my own words. The fact I can look beyond it and forgive it, despite this weirdness. Still, it's important to acknowledge, and I can see why some people might have checked out completely as a result of this. Kasane's trip to the future with the red strings happens right here in Phase 4, wherein we find a destroyed Suo, a dead Fubuki, and Karen says this whole dimension is doomed before stealing Kasane's power. We then meet an older samurai Yuito Samuraigi. Well, that's why I should never go off script. Who tells us that we have to kill the younger version of him to stop the Cunard Gate from swallowing up everything. The Cunard Gate appeared when Seto died. So all that time we spend wondering why Kasane is suddenly a murderous psycho is very well explained very early on in her arc. Another reason why playing Yuito's route first is so much more compelling. Also, Samurai Yuito is badass. I like this version of him. It's a complete contrast between the dude we'd known. He could probably take on Karen by himself, but he still has his little Baki keychain. Even this version of him still loves Baki. He's also blind, but they don't state why that is. Seeing the Cunard Gate enveloping the entire world is eerie, but also really beautiful in an apocalyptic way. And then Yuito sacrifices himself by letting another kill him, so that Kasane can travel back to her own time. Since her time travel power, the red strings, is triggered by strong emotions. This is why the Cunard Gate activated when Sato died, because Kasane freaked out. Bipolar shit, I love it. This Yuito wasn't a very good person in the end, and continued the awful research his family had been doing. That, combined with the world ending if we don't kill him, perfectly communicates why Kasane was convinced to kill Yuito in general. So if you play Yuito's route first, you might, quite like myself, go from finding Kasane annoying to thinking, oh, okay, she's actually the lovely one. I'm Team Kasane now. Kill him! Yuito is now having more memory issues and doesn't remember Luca turning up or Fubuki making him commander of an entire platoon. So we visit the doctor and he says, you're just tired. Take your meds. Take your meds. We then learn of duds. They can't use powers, which in this world makes them about 0.1% of the population, creating a discriminating environment. Harsh name, innit? Dud. This will be important for later, when it turns out that Yuito and Luca and even Karen are all duds, and Karen is like the most powerful dude in the game. For now, we head down into the older, creepier hospital to see what they're doing with Nagi. It's creepy and it's dull, and it's largely uninteresting in an interesting way. This is the old OSF hospital. There are a few areas in this game that go into full despair mode and distance themselves very much from the main futuristic vibes of the game and the hopeful ones, focusing instead on this archaic, creepy atmosphere, and the old hospital probably does that best. It's nowhere near as nice as the other areas, but I appreciate what it does, and I think that's what makes it so special in a way. Because the fact that I don't want to hang around here very long means that they have conveyed very perfectly the sinister nature of the place well enough for it to have an effect on me and want me to get through there as quick as I can, and have the environment mimic that with its craziness and its frenetic nature. So the creepy experiments, you know, the ones involving humans, others and human brains, they all take place here, and the almost monochrome ambience of the place is definitely appropriate. I think that's very clever. I'm giving a thumbs up right now. The song has dissonant notes of, well, evilness, I want to say. It just sounds evil. But much like, for example, Final Fantasy XIII, the composers can't help but have pretty moments in there that carry the weight of the emotional import of the story with them, but only in isolated little moments, as if they're trapped in a cage before then reverting back to the chaotic elements that propped up the song to begin with. It's a difficult place to hang around in, and that's why I like it. Even though I don't, but I do. It makes perfect sense. Nagi was rehabilitated, he says, but at least doesn't try to kill us this time. The boss fight is tough, so you better know the game by now, but Fubuki helps us out, and then opens a big pack of raw drops. The government are conducting research on psionic powers and brainwashing in that old hospital. Hanabi's family are involved, just as Yuito's is. A while back, Alice, Hanabi's aunt, was turned into an other, just as Naomi was, and then Kasane tries to kill us again. And we have to fight her in her brain field now, which is a nice reversal of the established norms of the game to mean someone else's brain field, because it puts you at a real disadvantage. And then Kodama Malone. Kasane's route takes off as a result, and in this route, Kodama will never turn up again. It will remain a mystery. It is cool that you have to play both routes to understand the whole picture with these little things. In Kasane's Phase 5, we make light of how she came to be holding the knife up to Yuito's dad, and the fact that she is in fact innocent. And Kagero, being the perpetrator, is known to us much earlier on. And other than that, you're fighting through the streets of Suwa, just like with Yuito's route. And then this.
Snakeboat. Ginger.
Huh? What?
Flax pig. Table slug? What? None of the words are matching what I'm thinking. Apple home child.
I see an abnormality in his cranium.
Apple home child.
I don't know if that's meant to be funny. I really don't. But it's the greatest line in any game ever that I can think of. Yeah, Yuito's getting a bit mental, so he's got to take the ampule meds. Good timing too, because Kyoko and Kagero jump us. Luckily, we find the vehicles in the Supernatural Life Research Facility, which is remarkably difficult to say in one take, and inside them are human heads that the others eat, So the government are collecting human heads in this usually upbeat game. I enjoy the tonal dissonance, they make it work, and I love the music here. This place feels like insanity made manifest into a building, and I don't just mean because it's a bloody keycard dungeon, it's just so self-enclosed, so eerie with the soundtracks, and yeah, it's perfect, isn't it? The song here is insanely cool. It sounds like a vampire movie played Cyberpunk 2077. Perfect for all the weird and crazy experiments that take place here. And the area is a drab and depressing place worthy of such a disturbingly cool soundtrack. The glitchy nature of the song and the stop-start nature of it all might be analogous to the strange mix of emotions that one might experience when entering into such a dark and deranged place. There's not all that much to say about the place aside from that, and I admit it is certainly not one of my most favourite places in the game. But for a keycard dungeon with depressing walls and overgrown crap all over the place, the soundtrack keeps me sane by making me go a little loopy, and I appreciate that it's supposed to be this way, so, you know, insanity can be fun, is what I'm trying to say. For I think the third time, Team Kasane turns up and attacks us, so Kasane finally tells us her deal. Naomi needs this place because, well, she's another now, and it's good that they dropped that on us, because at this point in Yuito's route, Kasane was becoming really annoying, and then they run off again. Thankfully, this is the final time this will happen. But while Yuito is going full Apple home child, we, as Kasane, on the other hand, flee to Seiran and finally get to see Naomi, who, since she's another now, well, looks like this. She's still sentient, and she can talk with her own voice, but that's depressing, so let's talk about how pretty Seiran is instead. Ah, Seiran. I love this place. The city's nickname is right, and it's like a blue reflection of Suo City's very red setting, and also feels more liberated on account of the fact that you can see off into the distance, and even looks like a body of water below. No, in this game, it could very well be a holographic projection, like so many other things, but it's all about the feel, I guess. So I guess if Suo is imposing and oppressive, even in its prettiness, Seiran is the other side of the aesthetic. It's your second main hub city, and it's full of life, but in a more positive feeling way. It's just as inviting when it really compels you to explore it, with its theme song and nice skybox and the colour palette. But it's also a lot more cozy, more grounded, and seems a lot less likely to bring out something that wants to kill us at any given moment. I don't remember others attacking this place at all at any point in the game. I could be wrong, but I don't remember it happening. The song switches the eccentric and modulated synthesizers of Suo in favour of a more upbeat and high-pitched frequency, or set of frequencies in this case, sometimes mimicking old Japanese instruments, and that's in keeping with the Eastern aesthetic of the place, which gives it a connection with our real world. Us, the players I mean, by likening it to a culture we know really well. JRPG fans, we know what it is. And it's overall a much less imposing place and soundtrack than its partner up in the other end of the world in Suo. Getting here for the first time in Yuito's playthrough, for instance, breathes new life into the game, and it's always great to return here and wander around for at least a little bit before things get hectic and start picking up again. So now we have 4 dedicated areas for downtime in the game, 2 of them being medium-sized explorable cities with loads of beautiful art direction to look at. Beautiful stuff. It's pretty hard to get across just how likeable the characters are in this game. Even the assholes are likeable. With the exception of the protagonist, Yuito, who has a few terrible bits of writing, you'll find that that really is the exception. Everyone else in the main group is written either quite well, really well, or phenomenally well. One of the 3. Intersecting stories in a way thematically consistent with the red strings, symbolizing connection between both events, world lines, and most importantly people, Yuito and Kasane being the biggest example of that. Scarlet Nexus is very character driven. And while the characters do appear and act young for the most part, we finally got a JRPG that isn't just about 16-year-olds saving the world, but rather a group of well-written individuals all trying to coexist with each other while simultaneously carrying their own baggage around with them. These guys take growth-stunting drugs, so they're all older than they appear anyway, but characters like Gemma are especially relatable for reasons we'll get into later, and everyone is given both a chance to genuinely shine as well as their own unique hook and vibe. Bond episodes, they help this along, alongside the optional gift feature, which are actually quite easy to obtain, provided you actually explore the world and pick up the items you find laying around, and remember to defeat the monsters loads of times for the more difficult drops. It's a good incentive to run through a level again, and in between story beats, the entire world is, at least for the most part, open for you to explore, from the cities and the side quests to the areas in which you gain the items related to those side quests. Bonding events hidden behind multiple DLC are an issue in this game, but I've moaned about that before. It sucks, but the higher ups at gaming companies push this crap on developers, no doubt, and it can't be helped. There are, I think, 19 extra bonding events via DLC. I think there's like a season pass and something else. You've got the EX1 bonding events and EX2 bonding events, and they include multiple characters at the same time, so we're really missing out by not getting it, but on principle, I'm just not doing it. It is unforgivable, and I expect nothing less of the out-of-touch higher-ups at Bandai Namco, or most gaming companies. Problem is, people buy it, so why wouldn't they do it? But the thing I always try to remember and keep at the absolute forefront of my mind is that these decisions are made by those out-of-touch, money-obsessed suits and ties in the higher offices of these buildings and not the developers. And if it turns out I'm ever wrong about that, God save us all. Here's hoping I'm not. At a score though, while what we're getting is ridiculous, we also get ridiculously likable characters. And I try to find the positive in things these days. It keeps me sane. They all come complete with their own arc, focused firmly on their own personal futures, something we can all relate to. Another thing I enjoy about the Bond episodes is that each character has episodes exclusive to the protagonist at the time. Naturally, the people in your squad will get more time and be more fleshed out, because there are more episodes for each of them, but getting 2 sets of 4 to 5 episodes with each person gives them much more time to shine. A different scenario and a different perspective, I suppose. It's a good way of showing how we act differently to different people, but are still the same deep down, like we show different sides of ourselves to different people. Yuito. Too forgiving, but not as annoying as many other protagonists in JRPGs. Give and take, innit? He still drives the story forward during his route, but he still drives me insane occasionally. Whereas Kasane is more gung-ho about everything, Yuito perpetually seeks to find a diplomatic solution to everything. Which is funny considering he wants to become a politician by the end, in response to the inevitable loss of his powers, being a dud and all. Given his choice of career post-game, maybe that's good writing, but the way in which it's implemented is seriously damaging to the game at times, not just him, but the game as a whole. Chillin' and Masubi's with some of the people who just attacked him during the last story section is really risky writing already. But what happens later with Kagero killing his dad, and him eventually just accepting it, and then Kagero stay in the group. I understand that the general idea is that Yuito needs group harmony to be preserved so that they can fight the big enemy and set the universe straight, so that's a good idea. And I also understand that the game brings every character together eventually and has to justify keeping Kagero around, so they don't have to get rid of a very fun and compelling character in him. But I think that there are times when the writers genuinely forgot that they even had Kagero do what he did. And so Yuito is able to deal with it in a way that's not particularly commensurate with what is realistic. It's unrealistic, and it damages him in ways that pop up into my mind every once in a while, just randomly, you know? And that sucks because he's funny. You know, he's likable enough to mitigate this selectively abhorrent writing and stay within the confines of a generally okay protagonist, but he could have been much better if they didn't do it like this. That said, the story survives it because Yuito's dad was boring and barely got any screen time and wasn't the best person. During the arcs of others, Yuito constantly expresses genuine concern and offers a lot of genuine insight, certainly in a way that seems a little heavy-handed and cringy at first, but once you get over the cringe curb, you know, the cringe barrier, you can learn to like that about him. I did. It's pretty typical for a protagonist of a JRPG that's written to be a good guy, so we need something to make him distinct. For me, it's the fact that he's not always serious. He's not always some by-the-book kind of guy. His reaction to Kagero killing his father may absolutely wreck him as a character, and he can never recover from his overly forgiving writing, because it makes him come across as almost psychotic. But in between, his love for Baki, his funny quips, and many other things, he still makes for a fun protagonist that I can tolerate for tens of hours. And his dynamics with the others certainly help to elevate him as well. So he's the weaker of the protagonists in my eyes, but still, him being a dud makes him somewhat relatable as well. I feel like a dud in my life. I think we all know what it feels like to feel like a dud. So all in all, these are protagonists you can get behind. I understand her more now. I understand her more. Her entire character arc revolves around her just trying to understand others and watching her grow as a person. As a result of this, I suppose attempt to understand people and empathize with others is really fulfilling. She's more willing to do crazy things than Yuito as well, so that makes her a lot more fun, and she doesn't take this diplomatic Yuito approach. She has this initiative devoid of that, so it's fun to switch to her after I run through the game with Forgiveness Boy. The way that Kasane struggles to get read on the emotions of others, even with how much she improves in this regard, really does seem like it's hinting at actual autism. Not making a joke there, actually being serious. Her almost monotone way of talking is almost certainly something the VA was instructed to do, specifically as well. But this is a trope in anime, and who knows if it's purposeful or not. Either way, labels get boring. Labels get really boring after a certain point, and Kasane's arc is more contingent upon her learning to understand others and meet people halfway. And so, seeing her try so hard to understand others makes you feel at ease around her. It leads to her being dense a lot of the time and making good comedic moments. So it's good to feel at ease with a character that you've been controlling for tens of hours. Gemma. Old. Tired of the world's BS. Doesn't even try to keep up with trends anymore. Hesitant to try new things. In a word, relatable. Feeling like the world has left you behind and still trying to find a place for yourself within it is something that you probably only relate to after a certain amount of decades, and I'm probably not even quite there myself, but I'm getting there. So it's cool to see this portrayed, and even cooler seeing Gemma find a way around it and begin to try new things and open his mind, becoming less scared of the newness of everything and more comforted by the only philosophical constant that ever existed, which is change. His bonding arc is about embracing change in the future, much like everyone else's, but his comes from the perspective of the second oldest member of the group. Kagero is about 2,000 years old, so there you go. So Gemma slowly learning to try new things, finding new things to love later in life, embracing change and enriching his life in the process, all becomes that much more compelling, I think. Being open to change and suggesting that it's never too late to change your direction in life really can start with something as seemingly insignificant and silly as a new food. That's what Gemma's arc suggests. All big changes do start with one little change, I think, and Gemma's arc sums that up perfectly. It's done gradually too, so it feels natural and realistic. They don't just try to force feed with it and do it too quickly. And I've said it so many times, but crazy anime games are definitely best kept grounded, my characters, and the characteristics of those characters being relatable, I suppose. Even in these crazy magical and sci-fi worlds, especially in them actually. Powers wane as you age in this world, and we learn that through Gemma's story. After retirement, soldiers just stop taking the growth stunting medication, so the body ages normally once more, but the abuse that their brains sustain over such a long time gives them issues, resulting in serious fatigue. Ultimately, he resolves to move forward, and his perspective completely changes due to a personal loss. He doesn't want retired soldiers to be cast aside anymore, and he wants to honour his friend's memory by enjoying the life he has left. But I think the added implication is that he can't discard himself anymore as a result, because he'd written himself off. Older characters, when written well, seem to be something I appreciate more the older I get. As like a 72-year-old, there comes a point wherein you get tired of the bland self-inserts and stop looking for your own reflection in the media you consume, instead yearn for something new. And I think that's when you start to appreciate these older characters. Not just because you're getting older as well. He felt a responsibility, now he's wondering how he'll even live outside of the military. It's nice that he finds purpose in Yuito's route, and in Kasane's, it's revealed that part of his new lease on life came as a result of Naomi getting him into cooking, and also the impact that she had on him by being such a nice person. Gemma's arc is brilliant. I think it's the best in the game. Shiden Ritter, or as I like to call him, Riden Shitter. First time I did that, it was because I misread his name, I think, but now it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I can't believe this game got me to like him. He's arrogant, he's fiercely competitive, just wants to be better than others at everything, so that makes him naturally combative at first, but through hanging out with the others for so long, and also having to deal with some crazy circumstances, he naturally outgrows this, at least for the most part. And even the things he doesn't change in, he'll at least admit where they stem from. And you can tell that he's in the process of trying to change it, even if he won't admit it. And it's his journey in learning to understand this that's really cool to see. For instance, if he isn't the best, who the hell is he to anyone? That's how he sees it. Which tells the player that this arrogant douche, like most arrogant douches, is just deeply insecure at heart and wants desperately to be respected. And that's very, very often the case with people who act like this in real life. Either respected or loved, and that's what they want. Every game needs a douchebag, right? And Yuito's route, we learn how upset that Shitter is about Captain Seto dying, because he was the one who saw something in him, like nobody else did. Even got him a custom mask made. He believes in the importance of hard work, and he also offers Yuito advice, even if he does accidentally insult our boy constantly. He doesn't like Forgiveness Boy because he's a pampered Samuraigi boy, as he calls him. That said, he says that Yuito needs to become strong enough to surpass his family name. Yuito realizes that maybe Shitter has his best interest at heart after all. But then Shitter makes the greatest mistake of all. He insults Baki. After he realizes that Yuito's a dud, I think he sees some commonality there. Yuito ain't the Gary Stu at all, actually, but rather one of the minority of people seen as inferior by society in this world and discriminated against on account of being a dud. It's a cool twist. It's reflected in how Shitter sees us too. Shitter's also a rare case of someone who really, really loves his combat element that he has as a power in battle. He loves lightning. Says it's remote and powerful, and there's a bonding event actually where we literally just watch a thunderstorm together. Now every time I use the power in battle, I imagine him in his head just having the experience like, yeah, me. He loosens up as we go along, I suppose is the thing, and Yuito teaches him to be strong in his own way. And he realizes he's been too obsessed with being the next Seto and needs to be the best version of himself. So he doesn't become some super nice guy, he just changes a little. Kasane, meanwhile, isn't fazed by him at all, and calls him out for going it alone in battle too often. Tells him to coordinate with the group more, prioritizing team synergy. He gets so angry at one point that Kasane catches him beating the crap out of a Baki plushie. Maybe he was pretending it was Yuito. It's actually hilarious. At first, it looks like his feelings of inadequacy are born partly out of him misreading his parents' words of encouragement. When they say do your best, it puts a great degree of pressure on him I think it's a cultural Japanese thing. Meanwhile, they'll praise him whether he does well or not. Maybe that's why he fixated on Seto. But the real reason he feels so bad is due to an accident caused by his powers when he was a kid. He finds a worthy rival in Kasane who bests him one-on-one, and eventually learns to view the rivalry in a healthier way. At the culmination of his Bond episode finale, he finally feels worthy enough to wear the mask that Seto made for him. So you know what? Shitter's alright. I like Shitter. He's alright for a douche. Tsugumi. Every game needs the sweet character who's pleasant to talk to and likes flowers or something. It's a perfect detox from all the crazy, and this one could see through solid objects. This is the domain of Tsugumi. She's shy, nervous and quiet, so Yuito is perfect for helping her come out of her shell. Turns out what you need to do to get Tsumugi to open up. Tsugumi! How many more times am I going to get that wrong? Probably forever. All you need is to mention gardening. She's stubborn and it suits her well. She's a diligent gardening soul. Her arc with Yuito involves finding a flower that Yuito likes, literally. It sounds simple. It is. We climb Hyena Mountain just to find it together. She's a good reminder that a good character doesn't necessarily need to be a complex one, or a character with some life-changing development every 5 minutes, just interesting, likable, funny, whatever. Just nice to see and be around. Her arc to becoming more confident is very relatable and very feel-good. With Kasane, once again the game makes the powers of a character a focal point, and Suchan's always using her clairvoyance to see how healthy plants are. She's basically the local environmentalist. When Kasane suggests just disposing of a dying tree, it's one of the few times where Tsugumi actually stands up to someone. Like, she apologizes later, but her stubbornness separates her from the typical shy girl who doesn't stand up to anyone. Some tropes are okay, but seeing them subverted is always fun when it's done right. She tells Yuito that his stomach is poorly before he even really realizes it, and Kasane that her knee is bruised. Basically, Tsugumi can see into everyone's body, and the game even uses this when Kasane points out that she could use her powers to detect diseases early. If we all had a Tsugumi in our lives, all those deadly diseases would be DOA. She's a mystical, magical bean sprout of healing. I like Tsugumi. I can't say enough nice things about her. I'll be sure to, though, as the story goes on. Kagero is funny, but also existentially depressed. His backstory of him being older than everyone else was a genuinely good twist, and having a family that he had to abandon gives him a surprising amount of depth. It also speaks to why he sometimes seems a lot more intelligent and wise than he lets on. I think that he's less hurt as a character by the Yuito forgiving him way too easily thing, but yeah, he catches some collateral from that. Tsugumi is basically like his daughter on the surface, similar but not a replacement. As for his daughter, he had to let go of her for his Holy Moon mission to take out a politician and do other Togetsu things. His family is long since passed, and so she's definitely a means of him coping with that, is Tsugumi. He asked Yuito to keep an eye on her during their first Bond episodes, and when Yuito presses him on his dad's murder, he actually manages to change the subject to chicks. And then he takes us on as his apprentice of, like, getting laid. Yeah, he wants to help Yuito lighten up. I would too if I killed someone's dad, but it's... Man, I can understand Yuito not wanting to kill him and keeping his brother from doing it too, but man, does it happen too quickly. Even with that though, Kagero has a new responsibility to help build a new future to replace the one he stole, according to Yuito. So I totally understand the idea. It's just that if someone kills your dad, you don't invite him out for coffee. Ironically, this weird responsibility has given Kagero his own reason to live. He was burned out terribly after 2,000 years, and a lost family, so this works out well for him. Does he deserve it? Depends. Chairman Samuraigi was not a good man. He did terrible things. Kagero assassinated him for a reason. In Kasane's route, he's a nice influence on her, but it's mainly about him revisiting places from his past and accepting his future. He abandoned Kikuchiba with a lively shopping district in his past, so it's nice for him to go back there and relive these memories. Honestly, sometimes reliving memories and overdosing on nostalgia can be the key to the future. I said that in the intro, I know, but I love that this game gets that. It gets it. Kagero is right up there with Gemma in terms of the other side of this game's narrative, the one I mentioned about feeling done with life and hoping to find a reason to go on living. For him, it's the others. Not those kinds of others, but it's new friends, the other people. Kagero's arc is a rewarding one, and he's a good character. It's just that one thing with Yuito's dad gets in the way sometimes. But if you look past that, and I certainly can, there's a lot to love about him. Lucas, my bro, man. Just the design decision alone to have this little dude be the bodybuilding fanatic who's probably stronger than anyone else in the group, but he's really dependable, and he's one of the most naturally likable party members in the game. You just want to trust the guy, and he never gives you a reason not to. For Yuito and Kasane both, his bonding episodes are more laid back and fun, I suppose, as opposed to everyone else's. But as someone who lives in Karen's shadow, on account of being his little brother, he has a lot on his mind. Yuito has a little brother syndrome as well, and this comes up as we endure Luca's workout routine and become gym buddies. In Yuito's route, we find out that Luca's crazy work ethic is partly down to him being a small guy, but mainly due to him and Karen being duds, just like Yuito. He's confused at Yuito being open about it, and the game points indirectly to the disparity in how Yuito and Luca approach this individually. Luca's kept it a secret for decades, whereas Yuito just said, yeah, it's what I am, whatever. And seeing someone be so brave when you've ran from something for so long is not nice, since it's basically a mirror reflecting your own insecurities back at you. And you lack the resolve to be open about them, so they both have heavy expectations placed upon them by society too, with Luca being a Septentrion and Yuito being a Samuraigi, so there's a point of connection there. Luca actually secretly hated Yuito because his family still loved him despite the whole dud thing, but it was only for a little while, and he can admit as much, at least. He knows it's becoming an obsession of his, with all this power talk. His dynamic with Kasane is a nice one too, and overall I enjoy his journey into a more confident man. With her help, he endeavours to try to build a society in which dads are treated equally to others. You know, the classism isn't brought up all that much during the main story because there isn't much room for it, so it'll come up more here. I'd have liked to have seen more of its effect, but in Luca we see it pretty well. Kasane convinces him eventually to lean on others to see his goal into reality. Hanabi. I'll get the bad out of the way first. I hate to say it, but as likeable and fun as Hanabi is, she's also the closest that this game gets to being your generic JRPG. There's always going to be shades of it, so you kind of skip it entirely, but sure. She has her own motives and goals, and they make her somewhat compelling and interesting, but she's almost a prototype for what this game would have looked like if they had decided on a terrible harem mechanic or something. It's really odd and pretty cringy watching her act like a schoolgirl over Yuito, and honestly seems out of place in this game, given how maturely they handle so many other things. But I am not in any way saying that she's awful. She's not. She's a lovely person. She's a great character to have around, at least most of the time. She's quite funny too, very upbeat, and if they removed the Hanabi crushing on Yuito stuff, at least dumbed it down maybe, she'd be a lot better. That's why I find it annoying. Once again, it just feels out of place, considering how the game does things outside of this. I'll admit one thing, sometimes it is funny to watch her get flustered about it. There you go, I'm not a total miserable bastard. Give it a few years. You know what, other than this, I do really like her character. I just had to address the annoying parts that come up a bit too much, but her arc is about trying to find her reason to keep on fighting in the OSF in particular. Now so far it's just been to be close with Yuito, which honestly is realistic. People do really weird things, really crazy things to be around people they like. And I've seen so many people make this mistake, and Hanabi does realise this. She's having trouble controlling her powers due to this though, which is so anime, it actually hurts a little. But it does work, doesn't it? It does work. And watching her get over it and become more self-assured is cool. She exposes her family name for being part of the awful governmental experiments in Nihumuka. And I do like her loyalty early in the game, when Kasane asks her to portray Yuito and she is not having it. So yeah, maybe the other characters are just so much better, but Hanabi's alright despite the annoying stuff. Kinda like Yuito in a way. Maybe they're perfect for each other. Kyoka Eden. I'm sorry in advance for every time I accidentally call her Kyoko, but Kyoka goes from likeable and warm to interesting and mysterious, then right back to her original state, which I suppose is analogous for now in story terms, chronologically, that she started cold, became warmer, and then went back to her cold nature. But ultimately, she comes around and chooses us. The running gag of Kyoka Eden, world's shittiest fry cook, is one of my favourites in the game, because they actually give it its own cutscene. She's the team mum, I guess, and offers advice when they need it, whether they realise it or not, and after Seto dies, even if she isn't the more veteran member of the group, she's definitely the most level-headed and mature. Gemma's mature, but has a bunch of issues. Kaguro is the opposite mature, and so Kyoka fits the role perfectly. Her arc involves her worrying about other people, mostly, which is very her, at least the her that we know, and the episodes show us a little more about how she was before the game's events. She dotes on Yuito, and it's funny, but the reason is that, due to her affiliation with Togetsu, she was ordered to spy on Yuito's mum, Wakana, when he was just a kid, and so Kyoka's known Yuito since he was really young. The good thing is, she knows about how his parents met, and how he was as a younger forgiveness boy. As a result of this, she became accidentally very protective and attached to Yuito, and it looks like this contributed to her warming up as a person, even before she betrayed Togetsu to side with us in the game. Her cooking isn't very warm though, it's probably quite cold, because it's so bad that it has to be censored by our brains. Living with Dr. Pope's memories in her brain makes her nervous, but that means she values this version of her, and people are just always changing all the time anyway, and she's developed a sense of identity, all her own. I guess this motherly nature is her sense of self and identity, and being around the rest of us has helped her to realise that. She's going to build her own memories. That's her plan for the future. For Kasane, we see these sides of her, there as well, but it revolves around her accepting that not everyone's okay with being doted on, but the OSF are like a family, especially our little group by the end. Kyoko goes into beast mode, as Arashi calls it in battle, and says that's the only trace of the old Kyoko remaining. As for a change, well, it was because of her OSF family. Us, basically, in the hideout. Kasane helps her to realise her own value outside of Tagetsu, and she ain't no puppet, even with Dr. Pope's memories, and Kyoko's just really likeable, really funny, really cool and warm. All these guys are, I know, but Kyoko is among the nicest, next to like Sugumi and Kasane. Arashi is Arashi. She does her own thing. She seems apathetic towards everything, but throughout her bonding events and story as a whole, you realise this isn't actually true, it's just how it seems. She comes around eventually, thanks to Yuito, Mr. Positivity, forgiveness. I think her carefree nature is good for the group dynamic. I also enjoy her silliness in dangerous situations, lightens the mood, it's needed sometimes. She's not uncaring, and she's not mean to anyone, she's just overly laid back. So she's the poster girl for the OSF when on the clock, and like a brain mechanic in her off time when she ain't slacking off. She's insightful, cynical, wise, but with a laid-back persona. Her arc involves very gradually scraping some of that off of the surface to reveal her true nature. With Yuito, she makes the forced break program, which literally forces him to take a break. Clues in the name. Forces him to rest at certain times, but it's forced, so she's considerate in an inconsiderate way. Does that make sense? I suppose. She claims she ain't sentimental, but her actions prove otherwise, and whether she's just hiding it or genuinely doesn't realise it due to being too caught up in her work is never expressly stated, and I like that. Doesn't need to be. She teaches Yuito to take breaks and just chill out every once in a while. And she ain't lazy per se, but rather she's just thinking efficiently. At least I think she is. She's a mystery. Her advice for Yuito is just as much meant for her brother Fubuki as it is for Yuito the Forgiving. So eventually Yuito goes behind her back and invites him to the hideout. It encourages Arashi to tell him how she really feels, and she just lets it all out. Not in some cringy friendshipy way, but in a chill, down-to-earth kind of way. The voice acting is really good in a lot of this game. She thanks Yuito after this by upgrading the forced break program to mess with his eyes. She's the brain mechanic after all. She worries about people, but unlike the other soppy gits like Kyoko or whatever, she has trouble outwardly saying it, so soft boy Yuito helps her with that, while she helps to lighten his load a little and take a break every once in a while. Kasane's route digs deeper into Arashi's relationship with Fubuki when Kasane directly calls her out by reminding her of how angry she was when her brother died, despite Arashi's indifferent demeanour on the surface, but even then she downplays it, likening herself to a mechanism which perfectly fits her mechanic archetype. I liked that touch. That's why she sees things the way she does, constantly trying to conserve energy and not waste what she calls precious stamina on pointless things. But this efficiency-first perspective often gets in the way of her relationship with her brother. Annoying Kasane, whose only experience with sibling dynamics is her and Naomi, who are really close. So when Fubuki gets in potential trouble, initially Arashi just thinks it's pointless to go help, since Fubuki's usually fine on his own. He's a capable guy, she knows he's strong. But it's nice to see how quickly Arashi rushes in when Kasane wakes her up and says it ain't worth him potentially dying. So now Arashi's action completely betrays her efficiency talk. Kasane was right too, when Fubuki was in trouble. When we save him, we learn that Arashi was so distraught when the OSF took Fubuki into the military as a kid that she used her HYPERVELOCITY on a wall and tore her limbs off. Technology in this game is always super advanced, so they just fixed her up, but during physiotherapy they had her write letters in order to help with that, and that's why Fubuki writes her letters, even now. It became one of his favourite hobbies. And so the letters Arashi thought were pointless weren't pointless at all. It meant a lot to Fubuki. So in the end, Arashi starts messaging Fubuki a bit, just saying good morning at first. She says she's Arashi 2.1 now. Arashi's a really interesting character. Never gonna be so reluctant to open up, makes any emotional moment hit a lot harder with her, like when alternate reality Fubuki dies, for instance. I really like Arashi. On the surface, she's just the poster girl for the OSF. Below it, there's a lot of depth for that. There's a good DLC that covers Karen's almost endless time hopping and delves into his motives, but of course it's DLC. It's an example of this wonderful game being hamstrung once more by the decisions of the higher-ups in the company that insist on screwing the player over with season passes and other related modern video game malevolence that all stems from the birth of microtransactions. And I'd say it's unacceptable, but it's all due to people's willingness to accept it. But there's nothing we can do when no one else really seems to care and just tacitly accepts it in the video games now, so for that reason my Karen analysis will be short, even though it should have been one of the longest and most compelling ones. The DLC involves Karen's seemingly perpetual struggle to change the course of events in the world to help Alice survive. That's his main goal. That's the thing that keeps him going. He's like Okabe from Steins Gate. Alice is Hanabi's aunt and a best friend to Karen and Fubuki, and she died before the events of the main story, and so Karen has been going insane and hopping through timelines like a madman, obsessed with the idea of saving Alice, and it's never explicitly stated, but I think what they were obviously trying to say is that they love each other very much. He wouldn't go this mad otherwise. Because of this, he acts the way he does in the main story. You get the impression that he views people in the events of the timeline as mere tools brought about by an apathy that's a result of this constant timeline hopping, all of these changes. And he's obviously seen some stuff. So certain plot points that look like they were dropped are probably just part of his grand plan. So he was ruined by the DLC, and conversely remade by it. Ruined in the sense that sticking his arc in the DLC dulled his edge as a character, and remade in the sense that he was given depth. It's just that the depth should have been consigned to the main story, and not artificially removed from it. Karen is positioned as a good guy, and then an antagonist, and then an anti-hero, and I think deep down, the last one is the most accurate. He's a thorn in our ass, but he's doing it for Alice, and what he considers to be the true timeline. He's kind of like Kaios from Final Fantasy XIV too. Not just Okabe from Steins Gate, but he knows more about multiple timelines than we do about the one that we're spending the majority of the game in. The thing is, it doesn't resonate with me so much, not just because it's relegated to DLC and artificially removed from the main game, but because also, during the course of the game, we spend the vast majority in one timeline, before then hopping to another right at the end, wherein Karen disappears, and is replaced by Alice, and everything else that may or may not have changed is up in the air. To be honest though, I'm fine with that. Karen gets a badass, selfless send-off, he gets his wish, and so his character arc has a genuinely nice resolution. All in all, Karen is a victim of the practices we see in modern gaming, but also cool enough to stand out anyway. He felt genuinely formidable with how he could copy our powers, and for a while beating him seemed hopeless. Even for an anti-hero, you want the antagonist to feel that way. That way it's all the more satisfying when you do beat him in the final boss battle. So yeah, Karen's cool. Turns out his hair was originally the same colour as Luca's, but it went all silvery the more he time hopped. But he could have been one of the best antagonists of all time, if the DLC stuff was altered in how it was presented and placed into the main game instead, in a way that makes sense. For instance, how cool would it have been to have suddenly, after nothing but Yuito and Kasane, get a divergent chapter close to the end of the game, wherein we play as Karen, and learn all of these things that we learn in the DLC. Basically just put the DLC in the main game, right before the end. That's the game Scarlet Nexus should have been, but the suits and ties and the CEOs see the world through money-obsessed eyes. It's all just avarice to them, all via season passes and battle passes and microtransactions and other related bullshit that's probably never going away. I'm okay with another video game crash, where the hubris and greed of the awful companies comes back to bite them, and games like this will arise from the ashes, I think, but without the bullshit that kept them down. That's my white pill today. We gotta find Nagi's stored memories about Naomi's transformation in the old hospital, but unfortunately he's been brainwashed, again, even more, and the fight with him is a legit tough one. After winning, we sort of didn't really win, and Yuito's head goes all wanky, and we're brought into the facility against our will. Yuito spent time here with his mum when he was a kid, and this is where we find out that he's a dud, alongside Luca and Karen. I mentioned it earlier, but this is what the game tells you. So when Yuito uses his powers, he damages his brain. That's what the Apple home child thing was all about. Fubuki saves us from captivity, but Karen accosts us on the way out. He's helpful in his own moody way, and he mentions Tagetsu. Obviously he wants us to go there. And we're going to flee there because Yuito's publicly been branded a traitor, even if he doesn't want to join Karen's rebellion. Everyone sucks basically, so we're running away to the snowy mountains. Well, not everyone. Our team is lovely, and everyone accepts Yuito when he admits he's a dud. This is the moment where it really feels like a family, which in a JRPG is like the moment where everything clicks. We have some banter, and try to convince Hanabi to use her pyrokinesis to warm us up in the snow, and the team feels great about things. Even in a game with such dark happenings, the warmth and the bonds of the characters keep it from getting overwhelming, and it fits in with the narrative and the aesthetic and everything else, symbolized by those red strings that you see all over the screen. It's all and everything the game does, everything is connected, it doesn't waste anything. During the cutscenes they border the screen, during gameplay they drape over the environment. It's genius for something so simple. It's intelligently simple, innit? I fucking love this game, man. While Yuito and the gang are dealing with Nagi in the old hospital, Kasane deals with Kadame, again, who can change her appearance to look like anyone. She's annoying, and a psycho. Turns out the convergence of both teams here was a coincidence, which is really funny. Yuito's art makes you paranoid as hell. Cozy vibes. PlayStation 2 vibes. Nature in abundance now. The ascent up the mountain really builds the level up as this leviathan that we have to fight as hard as we can as we fight the enemies, and doing so brings a sense of gravity and presence to the area. But outside of all of that metaphysical stuff, I just love a good snow level in a game. In something of a Scarlet Nexus trademark, we start in an enclosed, narrow, lower section of the area before ultimately ascending up right to the top and being rewarded by a picturesque view of the summit, all the while working our ass off to get there and having the game genuinely test our abilities as we do so, combining aesthetics and combat prowess. We're even granted a look down at all the weird looking buildings of the Tagetsu people. Nice touch. Frozen Breath is the song pushing you up the mountain, and it's a monumental departure from the style of music in the rest of the game. It's pretty, it's serene, and it's almost unassuming. It's perfect for a cozy snow level. Even when things get intense, it harkens back to the more traditional and high fantasy JRPG soundtracks that you might be more familiar with. If you're like me and this kind of game was a departure for you. This level's gimmick is that you can use the giant natural icicles to launch at your enemies, and I suggest you do so quite a bit, considering the self-destructing others that you don't want getting anywhere near you. So all in all, it's a piece of the more traditional and fantastical stuff in a game that's made futurism its calling, so to speak, and I'm glad it went in that direction with at least one level, as this level of variation can really help certain levels stand out all the more, and good games are just comprised of many good levels. This place is just cozy PS2 vibes in a level. Moon People Place, Tagetsu, is probably the locational embodiment of the missed potential in Scarlet Nexus. I talk a lot in this essay of an overabundance of ambition that led to the game falling into quite a few pitfalls that it dug all by itself, and maybe this is where every abandoned idea and missed opportunity is stored, metaphorically I mean. Though I do try to be balanced in my critique thingies, I always have, and I will say outside of what we know as the established areas of the world, the fact that there is a place even like this to begin with, that's as much a mystery to you as you leave as when you enter, is cool to think about. Getting here for the first time is an exciting thing. Sure, the story does lump it all in on you very suddenly, but the ethereal ambience of the place carries with it a weight that almost cuts through all of that excess narrative deadweight. And I think this is one of those little elements that helps the game get back on its feet and set itself up for what is a very strong ending. The ascent back down the mountain is just as exciting, for instance, and a lot of things are, at the very least, put into place here. It's not all bad. Tagetsu is an independent religious state that's cloaked in secrecy, and we'll soon see why. And these mass people know who we are. So this place is Plot Revelation Building. It starts with a woman who looks identical to Kyoko. She's one of the design children, created in the image of Dr. Pope, the founder of Togetsu. Togetsu itself is over 2,000 years old, and New Himuka was founded by people who came from the moon, because 3,000 years ago the human population decreased and they fled up to the moon, then came back a millennia later after things had died down a bit. The others, as in the horrific looking monster thingies, appeared long after the extinction belt, which is much later than the government claim. And the Cunard Gate is expanding and will eventually consume the entire planet because of Yuito's powers, so we have us a doomsday plot now. An incorrect universe is mentioned, which is almost certainly a nod to Karen's timeline jumping antics that'll be revealed soon. And when Yuito uses a computer to learn more, it tries to hack into him. Kasane helps us out because killing him isn't on her to-do list today. Like maybe she got the day off, but her group's been captured too, and we're ambushed, heading out to find another design child that looks like Kasane instead. "Why did you try to kill me?" Yuito asks with a smile. "Because future you asked me to," Kasane replies. "Well, that's alright then." If you play this route first, you'll find out now that Kasane's red strings activated earlier, and that's when she time travelled to future Suo and met Yuito there. And now the Cunard Gate will disappear if Yuito dies, essentially. Kasane is super nice now, and it fits with her growth and her own arc at this stage in the game as well. And now that she no longer wishes to kill us, we can exchange information. And happy memories. Kyoko tells us that she's a clone, and she was a spy, and it's not an issue, really, we're all weirdos. As in, we are now one big stupid family of lovable weirdos, the best kind of family. Kasane is one of the design children, obviously, but she remembers a mother, and Kagero tells us about the Moon People, of which he is one. He's over 2,000 years old, cold sleep, cryostasis. Believable in such a futuristic high-tech world. Tagetsu wants to go back in time and fix things so that the others never happened, and the extinction belt will go away too, which acts as sort of a barrier between Earth and the Moon, which the others sometimes pop out of, as stated. We don't want that because our timeline is one that we're really invested in. Tagetsu actually created the red strings power, so that explains Kasane, but not Yuito. So now the story is, stop Tagetsu, deal with Karen being annoying, and try to close Cunard Gate without Yuito having to die. And the story really picks up here. And I will say, dropping these revelations on the player now at the summit of Hieno Mountain feels like a watershed moment in more ways than one, just before we descend back down for the final act, if you will, of the game. Having all this dropped on you the first time you make any meaningful distance between yourself and the environment you've known for the whole game puts a great emphasis on the importance of far out areas and gives them an additional gravity by adding that unique element to it as well. As for Kasane's trip to Togetsu, she was there for clues on how to turn Naomi back into a human, which was the crux of that arc for a while at this point. Kyoko does a fake heel turn due to the Togetsu spy thing, and Kasane gets a flashback of Wakana, and we learn of her upbringing here. She was experimented on by the weird Togetsu clone thingies. Kagero the Shifty is the one to save us, of all people, and now Togetsu want Yuito and Kasane because of their registering power. As for the forgiving Kyoko thingy, she was barely even in control of her actions anyway, due to her memories being manipulated, but we talk her around. This is where the Kasane team becomes all family-like as well. Shit is super reliable. Kagero is shifty, but he comes good when we need him. Arashi's aloof, but she has a heart of golden nuggets. Kyoko's the mum, and Kasane's the weird, awkward hero. Family, man. As we escape, so does Team Yuito, and thus we converge. We have to fight Nagi again. Thankfully it's the final time, because he dies shortly after. To be honest, I don't find it too sad. He wasn't really around much, and he only really exists as a plot device. And I guess he dies as one too. This game does many things right, but Nagi is always something that they didn't make particularly interesting for me. I won't say they wasted him though, because he illustrated just how evil the government is, doing this to someone. But then the hard rock guitar solo plays during his death monologue, and it's fucking hilarious. It's really funny. Sorry. It's not always the anti-JRPG. It does still have some tropes, like the playing dramatic music when silence would work better trope. Is that a trope? It should be, we should give it a name. It's just so corny, it's so emotionally autistic. But I think that's why I also love it in a way, you know? JRPGs, man. We then finally meet Kaito, Yuito's brother, who's as brainwashed as the people he helps brainwash. He just doesn't realize it. Guess he brainwashed himself accidentally. He's talking about the ideals of the founder, Yakumo Samuraigi, and there's no getting through to him. He even sent Nagi after us. Turns out the Moon people created the Extinction Belt to seal people on Earth and reduce the population, so Yakumo created New Himuka to destroy the Extinction Belt and get revenge on the Moon. Fuck the Moon people, that's basically his whole thing. That's why this place exists. Kaito says Yakumo's alive, but even though he's obviously lost it, he's a nut job, so he's a lost cause. Wataru recorded the whole conversation though, so we're going to Arahabaki, where the city's main computer is housed. That's what makes all the projections happen on the buildings as well. I love how the lore is tied into the world building and vice versa. Rent-free in my mind. This dungeon, that's pretty much true of all dungeons, but that's pretty much all it is too. A dungeon. Sure, you get some cutscenes at the end, at least when you first visit, and it's a huge moment in the story, but in essence it's just a very large dungeon, and even then it's compartmentalized into 3 separate sub-areas with particular gimmicks and certain blocks, forcing you to explore it in full. Gameplay wise, it's the closest thing the game has to a difficulty spike, but it's not as insidious as a true difficulty spike, at least in my eyes. It's just a genuine test of your skills, a war of attrition, I suppose. Certainly related to how much you've actually engaged with the many properties of the combat system that the game's given you to use in the first place. If you've made an effort and really learned it, it'll be more of a war of attrition, as I've said, than a sharp difficulty curve. There are enemies everywhere, and many are mandatory fights, but this is, at least on the way back down, the first place wherein we gain access to the whole party, and it does look very pretty and distinct, the level. With access to the whole party, it includes little gimmicks for multiple powers, often used in conjunction with one another. So it's technically a puzzle in certain places, but it's creative and it's visually and sonically fun enough that I didn't even notice that that was what it was until I started writing the notes for it. And part of me wishes that this was what was actually at the top of Hieno Mountain. It's an area designed most likely for players who adore the combat in this game. And I will say that while the sheer number of battles can be very fun if you're in the mood for it, locking the player in certain rooms and making the majority of those longer, more difficult battles mandatory was a terrible design decision. I can't figure out why they would do that, and it really soured me on the place, in my initial playthrough anyway. Actually in my second too, since I couldn't do New Game Plus on account of having a different console. But this time, basically on a New Game Plus, it's like a fun trip. If you love combat to bits, I can see you not minding so much, but the option to skip non-essential battles is something that I believe should always be there for players who feel as though they've already become adept enough with the game's combat mechanics to just ignore certain enemies, other than bosses, obviously. Player choice, basically. I advocate for it all the time. That said, the area is good, and it announces itself with a genuine impact when you bring down the bridge. And the song's dynamic brain drive version has some awesome drums on it. Probably the best sounding drums I've heard in the game. So I guess the idea is even the levels I'm not that big a fan of all have something to love about them. We are going to go broadcast Kaito's words to the whole world. Just as we look like we're getting somewhere though, Karen shows up and tries to steal Yuito's power. I actually had a brain field saved up, so it was a lot easier for me, but it's only half a fight anyway. It shows we're growing stronger, and we'll get to beat him up later anyway. They don't pull this card too much with the you can't win this boss fight thing, so it's a non-issue for me. And even then, when games have annoying things, If they're good outside of that, they're easy to forgive, I found. Ultimately, he takes Yuito's power, leaves us in disarray, leading to one of the best parts of the game.
Who is they?
Who am I?
I'm sorry. Explaining will take too long. Just let me put this on you. You have to live, no matter what.
On the surface, its sheer power of friendship brings back the protagonist from the brink trope, but with the aesthetics, the music, the build-up of the scene, it all comes together really well. Even when they do the tropes, they can pull it off without being too cringy. And even when they are cringy, it's Kino cringe, you know? It's fun. With this, we're now all a big group of family wankers for the rest of the game. While Yuito's off dealing with Nagi and Kaito, Kasane's group got to deal with Kodama again. He's actually a couple of twins, Kodama and Yuta, and one of them impersonates Fubuki, meaning it might have been her when we thought we were talking to Fubuki earlier, though it's not explicitly stated. I'm fine with that. We beat him, but the Togetsu Slenderman squad rock up and Naomi dies protecting us. So while Yuito loses Nagi, Kasane loses Naomi, but this one was much more poignant for me due to how the game showed how close these two were. But also the great writing for the scene with Naomi's shadow appearing. There was a scene earlier on, actually, where Kasane got a message from her foster parents after Naomi died, and they were really awful to her. And she broke down, and you could see the message reflecting off of her face, the awful words they used. These writers have some incredible moments, just like this throughout the game. They have the most incredible direction and choreography, whereas other JRPGs go with the tried and tested, generic crap most of the time, and it gets really boring. This kind of thing really sets Scarlet Nexus apart with how they prioritize artistic creativity and unconventional ideas in the most poignant scenes. So, all in all, a thoroughly and wonderfully depressing chapter. Kagero comes clean to Yuito about the "I assassinated your dad" thing, and for the most forgiving man in the world, Yuito's reaction is about what you'd expect. Initially, this annoyed me because the most normal reaction is revenge, and Yuito was never actually going to do anything but beat Kagero up. But after thinking about it, imagine how weird it'd be, especially now we're a unit at this point in the game, for Yuito to straight up murder Kagero. It'd be understandable from a human aspect, but it's also a complete dead end for the group dynamics that the game has built so thoroughly so far. It'd be like throwing it all away. So I understand that the furthest Yuito goes is letting Kagero know he's on his shit list, and that makes sense, and only teasing the idea of finishing him off. But the real issue is that the writers shouldn't have let it happen in the first place. Kagero being the one to murder Yuito's dad, I mean, it created far more problems to the writing in a way that eclipsed any shock factor or depth that it might have been expected to add. Should have just had Nagi do it, to be honest. That would have been perfect. Either way, the Bond episodes with Kagero will now feel a bit weird, but I think Yuito, on some level at least, understands why Kagero did it, because Yuito's dad was involved in all that evil shit that the government were doing. But still, lots of problems that could have been avoided, and once again, the game's ambitious nature leads it into as many problems as it does spectacular moments. I guess this is what I'm alluding to when I say that the game's too good for its own good. And finally, the lore on the others in the extinction belt. There was a comet that passed by Earth carrying other particles. So the moon people, looking to reduce their overpopulation, pushed those particles towards the Earth and created the extinction belt, which I guess is kind of like the evil ozone layer. At least that's how I like to see it. Like an atmosphere that floats above the Earth, where others are unceremoniously shut out, and others, as it happens, are living creatures that come into contact with the particles, which I guess explains some of their resemblance to animals, and sometimes humans. Babe. Yeah, I know. Weird name. It's like fighting on a giant spaceship. I've really grown to love the place. It's like the indoor equivalent to the Arahabaki secure site. That's hard to say. Many insanely large, open, interconnected areas filled with enemies and very addictive in a way that you can get kind of sucked into if you're not careful. Once again, it's for the people who love the game's combat, but it is diabolically cool in how dark it is and how everything seems like one winding path to the goal at the end. If you've ever wanted an aesthetic akin to exploring the inner mechanisms of a spaceship-sized supercomputer, this profoundly esoteric desire can be met here. Really though, it really is like an indoor version of the secure site, so I guess it carries the same ethos of being a gauntlet of challenging enemies with unskippable fights at certain intervals, plenty of extras to pick up, and far too long spent here. But hey, it's a hell of a, well, penultimate dungeon. It's odd, between this one, the last and the next, the game actually has 3 final dungeons. Well, they all have the air of a final dungeon. Maybe that's why I was so exhausted. I've been moaning about final dungeons taking liberties for years. Even saying that though, these 3 together probably still ain't as bad as many other games take on the final dungeon, so I'll take it. Besides, the combat's so addictive that you can just get into a gamer trance. And at this point in the game, you've just gained access to literally the entire party, so there's enough here to keep things from being completely draining by setting you up with something new to give a go. It's confirmed that Yuito and Kasane have the same mum here, as Tagetsu uses a vision of her. Although for Kasane, it's not biological, so they're only really step siblings, I guess. The escape is cool, though. Just running for ages seems boring. Must be the camera angles and the fast pacing. Yuito, Kasane and Kyoka use their powers to stop, duplicate, and then drop the rocks on this giant other, and it's peak cinematography. They don't do full motion cutscenes often, but when they do, they're really good at it. Really, really good. The camera work, the positioning, the timing. It's the same later on in the hospital when Wakana and Kasane fight off the other, attacking Yuito. It's incredible. We're using the red strings though to time travel and go see Wakana, their mother, and we get to play as midget Yuito at the old OSF hospital. Shit goes down with another attack and Kasane helps out young Yuito, which finally reveals why Yuito had a vision of her at the start. It's a great way to do time travel, doesn't muddy the waters too much, and while we are dealing in multiple timelines, we stick to our own for the entirety of the game, barring the very end, which is similar enough and also left somewhat ambiguous. So what could have been an absolute mess here is actually done very neat and tidy, and that's even with Wakana turning up in our timeline for a while. Speaking of which, things get a little complex here, but the main crux of it is we have to enter Cunard Gate to unravel the entanglements, which are like wanky time distortions. It's a beautiful sequence, and Crossroads of Time is the song. It's a standout track. Unfortunately, Wakana has to go already, and though she doesn't say it outright, since she dies in this timeline, she has to go back and sacrifice herself for this to work. It's nice seeing her interact with Yuito and Kasane, however brief, and the scene where she returns and sits in the chair that they're going to extract her brain from is brutal as hell, even if they don't show it. This is where lack of music really helps. They prove it here, because the lack of music itself is one thing, but the build up on top of that, it's real shit, man. She's barely been around, but she made a really good impact. It's just a brilliant scene. The game has a real polar opposite mix of the dark stuff and the upbeat silliness that I'm still not sure how they pulled it off. It feels like it should be a tonal dissonance, and in some ways it is, but there's a congruence there as well. It does seem to work. There's one more entanglement though, and it's the vision we saw of Karen assassinating Yakumo in the past, and after that he took the dude's mask and impersonated him. So for the big finale, we got to infiltrate Samuraigi tomb and find a version of Karen who's been in cold sleep for a couple millennia. Whoever said Scarlet Nexus ain't simple. Final dungeons can be fun sometimes, and also shit. You never know what you're going to get. Today we get both simultaneously. Music-wise, this dungeon is so long that it has loads of theme songs, so we'll just let them play as we go. It's huge, and essentially multiple different dungeons in one. To be honest, being on New Game Plus now is great and all, but your initial run, well, you'd better love combat, or else you could be unfathomably exhausted by the end. Seeing parts of other areas as you go through and experience Karen's flashbacks. I'm sorry, Karen. How many more times am I going to do that? It gives you a sense of nostalgia, seeing the places that we've travelled along the way. It does a service to the other levels of the game and also provides something new and fresh, while also being very challenging at certain points. As final dungeons go, it fits the bill, and I'll leave it there. The rest can just be said as we run through it. This is where we learn the truth about Karen and Fubuki and Alice, and the background reasons as to the distortion of timelines, as well as Karen's antics and how the two intersect. The dude's basically in love. It's never stated outright. Alice was supposed to marry Fubuki, but her and Karen have a thing, or had one. He just wants a world where Alice is still alive and didn't turn into another. And as we said in the character section, he's basically Okabe from Steins Gate, and he's just been doing it again and again and again and again. The flashbacks showcase how Alice was turned into another. You'll also notice that Karen's hair used to be green, like his brother Luca, but I guess time hopping like Okabe from Steins Gate turns your hair white. Yakumo comes floating out of cold sleep and is revealed to be another Karen, as we already knew, so our Karen absorbs him into himself. Seeing the two Karens argue with each other is very unintentionally funny. When you meet your past self, I guess you just soak him up like a memory sponge. We need Karen to help us untangle this tangly, wangly bollocks, but he's not into the idea, so the final boss is him. And the Karen boss fight is a final boss in a JRPG, right? So even if the anti-JRPG has to have a multiple phase final boss fight, I'm okay with it, because it's been good in other areas too. It's the rules though. You need to have a multiple phase final boss fight in a JRPG, and if you don't, you're not a JRPG. At this point in the game, unless you're on a higher difficulty, The combat's a formality at this point. You should know how to approach any given situation at this stage, no matter what route you're in, whether or not you're in New Game Plus, especially considering how large the preceding dungeon was. Silver lining, I guess. And I do love the part where all of your party members turn up, one by one, after you get separated. It gets a bit scripty, but I think the spectacle is so good that it makes up for it, and you have agency for enough of it, that it doesn't get too annoying. Finally beating Karin is a good feeling. He's been built up as this legit tough guy, and we get a super dramatic cutscene with the hard rock guitars again, but they actually fit this time, and they're in the background and a very short friendship speech, and then with this, he finally relents. But he's still a sneaky bastard, so he's stubborn to the end and decides that to bring Alice back, he'll erase himself. And technically that's the world back to a disentangled state. The dude was annoying. I'm not sure if he's an anti-hero or what, but either way, a very compelling antagonist. It was interesting right up to the end. We erase the extinction belt, get rid of the oil spill in the sky, and it's a nice blue sky, and we revert the timeline back to a nicer one, but with Alice and no Karin. Partly good, partly not good, but I like the ambiguous nature of it all. There's enough finality to it that it all feels like good closure. The ending gives us a chance to speak with everyone at Cunard Highway before ending, and is a great way of letting the player digest everything and putting the emphasis back on the connection aspect of the game. Like, even with all the crazy stuff that's happened, it's about people. It worked so well that part of me still wishes for a sequel. Part of me does, where we can get Karin back, but once again, maybe I'm cynical, maybe I'm a doomer, but I just can't trust game devs in the modern age anymore. We see how much everyone's grown, and it feels rewarding knowing that they grew as a direct result of all of the effort we put into the game. And you have to max out their bond level in order to be able to see the extra scene with them at the end here. Otherwise it's just a short conversation. It's another good reward. That said, it's a wonderful and bittersweet ending. It wraps things up in a neat little bow, but leaves a little open to what else may have changed. The blue sky with the extinction belt gone is lovely, and it's good visual symbolism as well. It speaks to how well the game was made that it even looked nice with a sky looking like an oil spill. A game that was in many ways overly ambitious was able to lock itself in and keep things really down to earth when it mattered most. Carcena's off to the moon, Yuito's staying enough to retire, and the two play us out. And we get a lovely ending to their bond as well.
Fubuki! You're here too?
Alice?
What? Why are you so startled? Oh, you're with them too, Hanabi? What?
Alice. It's you. Wait. If you're here, then what about... Then... what about Karin?
Karin? I don't know him. Do I?
So we have a game that feels as old school as it does futuristic, and I think that's one of the best parts of any good JRPG. But of all of the things it does, and perhaps more importantly doesn't do, it is also the anti-JRPG. Thinking back on it, the vibrant and exciting locations bring the world to life, and the combat feels fresh enough to carry me through the crazy final dungeon. And I hate final dungeons. The characters and their dynamics are among the best I've seen in a game, and I love the emphasis they put on it, and how they tied it in with the aesthetic and the narrative of the game, to the point where it borders the edge of the screen constantly via the red strings, and it even shows up in the name of the game. It's everywhere. The music is otherworldly, but also personal and down to earth, and the story, while going completely off the rails at times, was pulled back in by all of these things together. I guess you could say that these things are what saved it, and it could have been a complete disaster without them. But either way, while it is still too good for its own good, all of my favourite things are monumentally stupid at times. I think it's the case for all great things that resonate with us the most. And this one resonates a lot for me, to the point I couldn't stop thinking about it, or thinking about playing it for nearly 2 years until I finally relented and went for it recently. As always, provided you play Yuito first and then Carcene, the story should keep you engaged far better. And I do kind of wish they'd forced the player to do it that way, but it's also 2 games to the price of 1, so that particular bit of ambition worked out well in the end. All in all, and with every video I say for a game that's probably in my top 5 games ever, or at least the top 10, words become sort of redundant at a certain point, and I think we just crossed that threshold, so I'll bookend it Scarlet Nexus has endless amounts of charm, passion, creativity, and provides a fresh new experience in a JRPG scene that, at this point, much like gaming as a whole, when you think about it, has become so incredibly oversaturated with endless slop designed to maximize sales for businessmen who don't understand the first thing about gamers and why we play games to begin with. And it does it by combining the most simple and time-tested ideas like connections and bonds, but with the craziness of every unique element that we've covered today. So yeah, I'm kind of sad to let it go for what could be the final time, but once again, as nice as a sequel may have sounded a few years ago, this is also an incredible endpoint. Maybe a sequel would be incredible, but if this is it, then I'm cool with it becoming a timeless classic with a niche fandom. Scarlet Nexus is fucking beautiful, and it's an actual masterpiece in a world of supposed masterpieces, and I'll miss it. Special game.